Well, ladies and gentlemen, we will start our meeting in a minute. Please prepare yourself. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nanda. It's a wonderful and precious chance for me to be your master of ceremony in this beautiful Thursday, 18th of February 2021. In our international webinar, Nuclear as Clean and Sustainable Energy Resources, N-CaSE in Indonesia, or well known as N-CaSE. This event, held by Kommun Yogyakarta, Thorcon International, and Stand Up for Nuclear. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let's say thanks to Allah who has given us guidance, happiness, health, and mercy so that we can attend and participate in this event without any obstacles. And let me say big thanks to all parties for participation and support in this event. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our agenda, let us pray together. Pray begins. Well, finished? Well, we continue with sing our national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Well, let's start singing. Well, thank you. In the special morning, we have several agendas, so allow me to read several sequences of our agenda. The first one is opening ceremony. Second agenda is greeting. The first greeting is from Chairman of Kommun Yogyakarta, Mr. Hafiz Akbar. And the second greeting is from Chief of Representative Thorcon, Mr. Bob S. Effendi. The third greeting comes from the Chairman of Stand Up for Nuclear, Ms. Paris Ortiz. The next agenda is lecture from our special speakers that divided into 3 sessions. The first session is lecture from Mr. Ir.Dadan Kusdiana, Director General of New and Renewable Energy and Energy Conservation Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia with topic Indonesian Nuclear Regulation. The second lecture from Mr. Satya Widya Yudha, the member of National Energy Council of Indonesia, with topic Nuclear, a viable option for climate change solution. The third lecture is come from Setup Nuclear with speaker Mr. Mark Nelson with topic Nuclear energy is the most environmentally friendly and sustainable. And the last lecture from German academic with speaker Mr. Peter. Well, the question and answer session will be held in each sessions. For all participants who want to ask the question, please write down your question in Zoom chat room or YouTube comment with format name underscore agency underscore question. For example, Nanda underscore X University underscore the questions. Well, in this main agenda, we'll guide by our special moderator, Mr. Bob S. Effendi from Thorcon International. And the next agenda is logo launching of Kommun Yogyakarta, and the last agenda is closing ceremony. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue to our next agenda. Our next agenda is greetings. The first greeting is come from our chairman of Kommun Yogyakarta, Mr. Hafiz Akbar. The time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Respectable Mr. Dadan Kusdiana, as Director General of New and Renewable Energy and Energy Conservation, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources of the Republic Indonesia. Respectable Mr. Satya Widya Yudha, as Member of National Energy Council of Indonesia. Respectable Mr. Bob S. Effendi, as Chief Representative of Thorcon International. Respectable Mr. Mark Nelson from Stand Up for Nuclear, and all attendees who have been present wherever you are. First, let me give thanks to the presence of the one and only God, and pray to the Prophet Muhammad SAW. I welcome everyone at the collaborative international webinar entitled Nuclear as Clean and Sustainable Energy with the Kommun Yogyakarta, Thorcon International, and also Stand Up for Nuclear. Talking about nuclear, we are talking not only about explosion, not only talking about radiation, not only talking about the tragedy of Fukushima Daiichi, Chernobyl, and 3 Mile Island. Talking about nuclear, we're talking about energy, about new hope, about bright lights, more educate children, and welfare. We are currently in time when it's becoming an increasing sophisticated era. Computerization has entered all lines of life. Work is easier with the presence of science and technology. But have we ever imagined that all the technological sophistication that we enjoy now will only be exhaust and in vain? We are talking about the Internet of Things, but it's no point if there is no electricity. We are talking about autonomous vehicle, but there is no point without fuel, and we are talking about big data. There is no point without a battery. Therefore, energy is very important in life. But talking about energy and fuel, we also see how the Earth is getting hot. Pollution and depletion of ozone are bringing disaster closer to humans. Inevitably, change is the key. Creating a clean and cheap energy that is so pro-welfare, and the answer is nuclear. Talking a lot about nuclear will never be separate from a paradigm. A nuclear stereotype is disaster, or a paradoxical assumption senses called NIMBY, which is not in my backyard. Or nuclear may be built, but not in my place. Even though nuclear is the most potential energy, which is still very minimal to this day. Even in Indonesia, nuclear is only study and research. Therefore, there is a need for a paradigmatic revolution to view nuclear as powerful energy, as a value that we should apply, especially with a highly developed science and safety and reliable that are highly calculated. Kommun Yogyakarta is a youth organization formed to become a leader in terms of socialization, education, and also dissemination of science and nuclear technology. Kommun Yogyakarta is a group of the young people who gather on the basis of consent for nuclear. Kommun Yogyakarta is a place of struggle for the development of the potential and milestone of a youth courage. Don't call us Indonesia if we don't dare to make a change. And Kommun is the representative of the change. I'm Hafiz Akbar as the General Chairman of Kommun Yogyakarta. Thank you for the more than 1,500 participants who watch our event on Zoom and YouTube. It is a sense of pride and respect to be able to collaborate with Thorcon International and stand up for nuclear. Kommun Yogyakarta has been very active in the field of socializing and disseminating nuclear to the public, especially in various studies and discussion. But today is the most historic. Today, I invite Indonesian youth to rise up and care about energy independence in Indonesia. Don't let be us led. Don't let us regret. What Indonesia can only be achieved by the golden struggle. And therefore, as a golden generation of Indonesian nation, we should join hands for Indonesia to be self-reliant on energy. And nuclear is the answer. And lastly, let me close this with a jargon of the pride, the Kommun Yogyakarta. Nuclear Jaya, Indonesia, Dikdaya. I think that's enough for my welcome speak. More and less, please apologize and allow me as a sense of pride to be Indonesian people and grow up in Indonesia to close this all with my reason. Tabulah tabu si gendang belah, jangan ditabu dengan belati. Bila ada kata yang salah, jangan disimpan di dalam hati. Jika ada sumur di ladang, bolehlah kita menumpang mandi. Bila ada umur yang panjang, bolehlah kita berjumpa lagi. I think that's enough. More and less, please apologize. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, Mr. Hafiz Akbar, for amazing speech. Well, the next greeting is come from Thorcon International, Mr. Bob S. Effendi, Chief of Representative Thorcon. Time is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm the Chief Representative of Thorcon International. First and foremost, I would like to thank Kommun Yogyakarta for holding this event, which is international event, which surpassed, I think it has been registered participant 1,340 as I was reported, which I think is a world record for nuclear seminar, at least in Indonesia. I don't know in the world, but I think it is very huge. It shows how the Indonesian people have a very interest in nuclear. Secondly, I would like to thank the respectable Dr. Dadan Kusdiana, Director General of New and Renewable Energy, and also respectable Dr. Satya Yudha, the member of the National Energy Council, and Mr. Mark Nelson for co-sponsoring the event, international event. As most of you have known or not known that Thorcon International is the only nuclear company operating in Indonesia. We are proposing to build a 500 megawatts thorium nuclear power plant in Indonesia that have a highest safety and a competitive tariff as an IPP, independent power producer. And we are happy and delighted to sponsor this event. I hope this event would be the first one of the series of nuclear talk series. And we'll be happy to cooperate with Kommun and nuclear stand up for nuclear, right, for future event. Without further ado, thank you very much for everybody. And I hope this will be a successful webinar, and I hope it will shed some lights about nuclear as sustainable energy and environmentally friendly energy. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Bob S. Effendi, for the greetings. Well, the last greeting is come from Stand Up for Nuclear. Mr. Mark Nelson, the chairman of Stand Up for Nuclear, time is yours.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for including me on this call. I think I have some interesting information that if I were a young person in Indonesia should excite me greatly. And so I am happy to walk through my presentation with you now, as soon as my screen sharing is enabled. I am involved in Stand Up for Nuclear, but truly no one leads it because it has organizations around the world. Last year in 2020, despite the global pandemic, Stand Up for Nuclear was very happy to receive 30 nations with more than 60 events around the world, all volunteers, mostly young people, but truly people of all ages, depending on the country. And I think it's important to be able to say that you are excited, openly excited and happy about this opportunity for your careers, and most importantly for your country. Because if you can find excitement in nuclear, then the benefits of nuclear for the environment and for your country can come soon, much sooner than they would if you were keeping private and not talking about your interest in nuclear energy. So I will begin to share my slideshow. Hafiz, if you could get me the ability to share screen here.
Mark, sorry to cut you, but you are just for opening speech right now. Your slot for discussion will be on the third slot.
I understand.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
Right. So
you
this
will
is
have to wait in anticipation.
Right. Sorry about that, Mark. All right.
No problem.
So maybe you can talk about what Stand Up for Nuclear is, so everybody would know about your organization. Introduction.
Of course. Stand Up for Nuclear began a number of years ago with an idea to have all the organizations in Europe, all the nonprofits, all the advocates who believe in nuclear energy come together for a meeting to decide what should we do to go out in public and declare our support and appreciation for nuclear energy, even our love for nuclear energy. This was in August of 2018. The decision at that time in a meeting in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, was that we should go to one of the most difficult countries in the whole world for showing love of nuclear energy, to Germany. In Germany, in Munich, in the autumn of 2018, almost 100 people gathered from around the globe. Students from as far away as America came to Munich, Germany, to express our appreciation for nuclear energy and our excitement for it. From that moment, the movement has only grown and only spread. In fact, the next event was supposed to take place a year later, but European friends could not wait. We held another event in the rain in Brussels in 2019, right in front of the central train station, arguing that nuclear energy was very important for Belgium, and should stay online and in fact be expanded. From there, it just spread like wildfire. What happened was we had so many people contact Stand Up for Nuclear and say, why can't I participate? I want to be able to participate, but I can't travel from Sweden. I can't travel from Argentina. I can't. And so suddenly, organically, around the world, people were putting on their own event, just like this. So in the autumn of 2019, there were almost 30 events in about 20 countries around the world. And then it's only been growing. We've had people decide suddenly to host one of these events and end up on national news within just a few days. And then afterwards go on to found their own completely new volunteer organization to advocate for nuclear energy in their country. And in a few countries around the world, this effect is growing so strong that in fact, the movement to get nuclear into the country is coming out of Stand Up for Nuclear. And in other countries that are powered by nuclear energy today, but because of old laws are required to close down their plant, Stand Up for Nuclear has become an organizing principle to allow hundreds of people to rise up and to protect not just their own jobs at a nuclear plant by saying, I am here, I love nuclear, I will say it in public, I will say it to journalists, but also to say, I am not just fighting for my job in nuclear, I'm fighting for a cleaner world, a better climate, cleaner air, and protection of economic opportunities for my grandchildren. So I think that is probably the best way to describe it. Stand Up for Nuclear is me, but it's you. And this event is unprecedented only 2 or 3 years ago. And although I have to say it does seem like the Indonesia Stand Up may take the global record for biggest event, it's one of an increasingly powerful number of events that from Mexico to even Cuba, Indonesia is just another step along the way of young people around the world working with all ages to show that we believe in nuclear energy and that we see our future in it.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was beautiful. Thank you very much. MC, please continue.
Okay, thank you for Mr. Mark Nelson and Mr. Bob S. Effendi. Well, we get arrived in our main agenda. Our main agenda is lecture from our special speakers that talk about nuclear as clean and sustainable energy resources in case in Indonesia. Well, as we know that nuclear is something crucial in our country, Indonesia. There were many misconceptions, misinformation about nuclear, like radiation and others. Well, how nuclear can be the cleanest energy and sustainable energy? We can get the answer in our main agenda. Now, let's start our main agenda. Amazing lecture from our speakers that guided by our special moderator too, Mr. Bob S. Effendi.
Thank you
Ladies
very
and gentlemen, for Mr. Bob S. Effendi, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Nanda, for the time. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce our first speaker. He is the Director General of New Energy and Renewable Energy and Energy Conservation, Dr. Dadan Kusdiana. Now, Dr. Dadan Kusdiana has a doctoral from Kyoto University and a master degree from Kyoto University, and a undergraduate from Institut Pertanian Bogor. So as you know, the Director General of New and Renewable Energy and Conservation is the key Director General who holds basically the nuclear key. So this is the guy that hopefully could open the nuclear door in Indonesia. Now, without further ado, I would like to present Dr. Dadan Kusdiana. Please, Dr. Dadan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Terima kasih Pak Bob. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning to all of you.
Jika kita perhatikan perkembangan energi global di era pandemi COVID menurut IEA, proyeksinya mengalami penurunan.
Yes, thank you. Excellency Pak Satya, Widya, Yudha, terima kasih Pak sudah selalu bergabung. Mohon maaf saya selalu di depan, tapi saya selalu mendengarkan, nanti Pak Satya juga menyampaikan. So Pak Satya is from the he's one of the member of National Energy Council of Indonesia. Good morning also to Mark. Are you in United States or somewhere?
I am a working professional and I live in Chicago, USA, where I've just moved from San Francisco.
Okay, nice to see you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yang saya banggakan nih teman-teman dari komunitas muda nuklir Yogyakarta, Kommun. So Kommun. Well, this is new for me and very exciting to see you all, to discuss, and also to others here. I just read on the chat that many coming from the universities, also from all over the Indonesia, yeah. Bandung, I think some are already in the list. So really appreciate the initiative of Thorcon and also the Kommun for this kind of the discussion, yeah, the sharing session for us. In particular for you, Hafiz and all Nanda, the young generation, because if we agree today that we will build the nuclear, then nuclear is not within 5 years. We need some more years to be in place, yeah. So that must be in your time later on to continue. But I think it's necessary for us also to understand the current situation, why then the government is not putting the nuclear as the priority in terms of the urgency. Yeah. So I will talk on that part. I'm also currently is the acting chairman for research center of the ministry here. We have been working with the Thorcon, I think, already 2 or 3 years.
That's right.
We have 1 or 2 papers already published together with Thorcon in terms of the technical issue, in terms of also the economical study. Yeah.
Yes,
so
that's right.
I think we have a lot of papers already for you, the young generation to learn. In terms of the technology, in terms of the economy, and also other issues, in particular the social. So I have also been questioned, also discussed with the representative, the legislative, and one of the conclusion is that it's written in the conclusion that nuclear would be seen as the one viable option. And for this, I think we have Satya here, so that will be one among others the important task. I mean to follow up this kind of the policy. We are in terms of the regulation, but policy I think coming from the DEN. So some of you maybe know that, maybe aware that the Ministry of Energy also is currently finalizing the Grand Strategy Energi Nasional. This is the horizon is up to 2035. So 15 years from now, and if you are probably, for example, Ananda or Hafiz, I think you are in the age of 20, isn't it? So by the time 2035, you are the executive for this kind of the business. We are providing the fundamental preparation on this part, and it's really up to you later on how to continue this initiative. I will share with you slides just to make it easier for us also to understand the situation, I will combine my speech with Bahasa. My slide is already in English for Mark and for others that are not familiar with Bahasa can also read over from the slide next. Next. So I will start with the Indonesian commitment, because this is, I think, one of the most important issue for us in why then we need the nuclear on this part. Yeah, we have a commitment. Our president has made commitment in 2015. We are part of the country that ratified the Paris Agreement through the law number 16 in 2016. So with the target is to reduce the greenhouse gas emission by 29% and in 2030. Yeah, and for that, for energy sector, we are or we have to contribute at least 314 million ton CO2 reduction by 2030. It will be coming from renewable energy, from energy efficiency, from energy conservation, and also for the green energy technology application. So energy sector will be responsible for 34% probably in terms of the percentage, because in total 29% is equivalent with 800 million ton of CO2 reduction. And how is the result so far in 2020? In 2020, from the target of 314 million ton of CO2 reduction in 2030, we have reached 64 million ton CO2 reduction.
Pak.Dadan, your slide is not showing here. I haven't seen your slide. I don't know.
I don't know either. Yeah.
Panitia mungkin ya. Okay. Please help.
I will repeat the. Can you see?
No.
Udah sharing belum?
Not yet. Okay. Okay. Now. Okay.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. So this is the historical achievement of the CO2 reduction coming from the energy sector, coming from energy efficiency, renewable energy implementation, and also the use of low carbon fuel, as well as also the green power plant technology, and also some others implementation coming from mining sectors. So in total in 2020, we have reached 64 million ton of CO2 reduction. And even these are higher compared with our target in 2020, which is 58 million ton. Yeah. And actually, we see in 2017, 2018, and also 2019, I think our commitment are still in line with the target. The achievement, as you can see here in the screen, that is still on the track. Yeah. So we are on the track to reach 314 million ton of CO2 reduction coming from energy sector. But this is within 5 years. So the number will be in magnitude. I think the number will be increased quite a lot within 10 years. So this is only something like 20% from our target, and we have 10 years to reach on that part. Next. Coming to the issue of renewable energy and new and renewable energy. I mentioned that from renewable energy, the target of CO2 reduction is 50%. So the focus is on this part, how to reach our commitment on the Paris Agreement. We have huge potential on renewable energy. I don't put here is the nuclear, but here is only for renewables. We have more than 400 gigawatt in terms of the potential. Some are already in terms of the resources, and the right here is the install capacity of the renewables. So only 2.5% are already in use in implementation from those of the target of 417 gigawatt. Most coming from the geothermal, bioenergy, because we are in the tropical country, agriculture region. We are heading to add more wind and solar because the economic are showing the best performance so far. And also in terms of the time for the construction, wind and solar will be our priority on particular is the solar. Yeah, the solar. Hydro, I think this is the old technology, and more than 6 gigawatt are already in use, in implementation, spread out of the country. Next. So we agree, and we are in the process of to do the energy transition, to have more cleaner energy, to have carbon neutral ecosystem, in particular for renewable energy. And how then we start to go to that part? You may know that currently we are in the excess supply of electricity in the national level because of the growth of our economic is not fit with what we have been in planning. So we have more electricity to be used currently, but the issue of renewable energy, the issue of to reduce the greenhouse gas emission has to be reached, has to be implemented in this difficult situation. So we start with to use this substitution. We use, for example, biofuel mixed with the diesel fuel. We have no B30. This is the highest actual implementation in the world in the national level. We have been in commercial also implementation for coal firing in some of the coal power plant owned by PLN. We start also to use RDF. This is from municipal city waste. So we don't add the capacity of electricity, but we add more renewable. We mix in that part. The second is to do the conversion. We have many diesel power generators spread out in the country, distributed to provide the electricity to the citizens, to the people. Most are located in difficult region, remote, and also high cost for the implementation. So we have agreed to convert this kind of the power generation to be used by renewable energy. We start this year, PLN has been in implementation on this, with the target for this year is to convert around 200 megawatt. And the third is to increase, to add more capacity from renewable energy. It also probably for nuclear also will be in this category. Yeah. For 1 and 2, we don't add capacity. The first is we just add the renewable energy. The second, we have to change the technology. We have to change the engine to use the renewable energy as the fuel. And for the third, this is the additional capacity for renewable energy. And we have to wait on this part, yeah, because the capacity of electricity from PLN is still in the oversupply. The government also, together with others, try to use more renewable energy for non-electric and non-biofuel. For example, as the energy for processing agriculture, whether this is for drying or other related activities. We have also two more activities here, the strategic program. This is electric vehicle and energy efficiency. Those are also related with the achievement of the greenhouse gas emission. Next. I will skip this one. I think it will be Pak Yudha, Pak Satya will be mentioning on this part. Next. So the strategy here up to 2035. I mentioned already that when we have the green grand strategy of national energy plan. Yeah, I think it's been now is also being discussed with the Satya office to have more comprehensive input and in terms of the planning here. So we are targeting to have something around 38 gigawatt additional electricity coming from renewable energy and including the nuclear power plant here. So next. So this is the analysis from IEA. So we have done the activities in 2009. And from 19 items of nuclear energy, we have clear that we have been completed of 16 items. 3 of these are seen to be prepared. The national position, we have been in the conclusion that go, no go, or to nuclear. We have already in RUN, we have already national energy policy, but in reality, I think the government, the president has to declare specifically that we will go to the nuclear. B is the NEPIO, this is the organization, and the C is involvement of the stakeholders. I think this activity also part of that items. Next. Then in terms of the regulation, we have the Nuclear Act number 10 in 1997. We have also National Long-Term Development Plan. We have also law on energy. And the last one is Omnibus Law. We have here also mentioned in the very new law number 11 this year, every activity of utilizing nuclear energy is obliged to fulfill business licensing coming from the central government. Next. So we are talking about the planning 2020-2024. This is middle term of the national energy planning. So from 2020, I think I mentioned already, we have cooperation with the Thorcon on the research. I think actually from 2019, we will do the kind of the starting to make the international cooperation for the study of the nuclear and doing some more analysis, multi-criteria analysis of the implementation of nuclear power plant, including the many views coming from various stakeholders. So then in 2024, we will do the kind of the implementation of the roadmap of the nuclear power plant. Those are related ministry that are contributing to the implementation, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Research and Technology. Next. Yes, I think this is kind of the regulation that supporting the implementation of nuclear. So we have actually already in the present regulation. This is national energy policy. I mentioned already the medium term of the implementation and others. For example, the government regulation number 2, 2014, and the nuclear installation license and nuclear material utilization. I think most of them are already in place in terms of the practical implementation regulation, yeah, including RUPTL, Electricity Provision General Plan. Next. So in closing, Ibu Bapak sekalian, teman-teman, Mark and Pak Bob, Indonesia is committed to achieve the target of Paris Agreement as well as also the target of renewable energy. So as part to accelerate renewable energy development, strengthening policies through the preparation and also revision of regulation are essential for us to work together to prepare this kind of the conducive regulation. So I think that's all from our side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ir.Dadan, for your presentation. That is very wonderful. So people would know. It seems that from your presentation that that Indonesia is like one step away from realizing implementation of nuclear. And it is wonderful to see that the Ministry of Energy has put forth a step-by-step approach from now to 2024, doing many studies so that eventually by 2024, that hopefully the government will make a decisions. So with that, I think that is the conclusion of the talks. And with that, I would like to open up for a questions and answer from the audience. If you have questions, please write it in the questions box, question and answer box. We have one questions here, Pak Dadan, from Halason Sutanto. His question is, what are the most contentious issues surrounding nuclear energy, and what does nuclear energy impact to the environment? So maybe if I have to translate, what is actually the most pressing issue, or the most issue that is the government are looking at for implementing nuclear power plant? What is the pressing issue? And the second question, and how does nuclear energy impact to the environment? Those are the questions, Pak Dadan. And yes, please, Pak Dadan, if you would like answer that questions.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your question. I think for the first one, that if I may explain in different way, that as I mentioned, that we are in the position that we have enough already the electricity in the country. Yeah, the current situation. Yeah, the current situation is we are in the excess supply of the energy. We have. I saw to you also that we have more than enough resources, potential resources from renewable energy in the country. So, yeah, sometimes it's difficult for us since we have so many potential. Then we are confused. Itself that which one has to go first. We have solar, we have geothermal, we have others. We have to do this kind of optimization. We have to do the diversification. But so far, in terms of the nuclear, that's why the term is to put is the latest one at the option. But then I think this is probably we have to consider later on, because the preparation if we go to the nuclear is not as simple as if we go to the solar park, for example, that we can prepare between 1 or 2 years. So at least we have 19 issues that mentioned by IEA. We clear already of the 16, so then we have to clear the 3 left. So this is probably that we have to work on together on this part. And about the impact of the nuclear, I think you may understand already the situation, what happened in the world in terms of nuclear. Yeah, but for us here, positively, nuclear is free of the greenhouse gas emissions. So we have to put this as one of our strength supporting issue among others. Yeah, why then we need the nuclear. In terms of the reliability, also nuclear provide the best so far. But then we have to be very, in terms of the technology, in terms of the safety. So in this part, I think we have, I don't really understand in terms of technical issue. Yeah, my background is not in the nuclear. But as far as I know that we have many steps to go before the government or the president in particular to decide that we have to will go with the nuclear power plant. So in terms of technology, I think that there are so many technologies already available. That's why in our grand strategy we put already the word of the nuclear in terms of the planning, which is previously you cannot find the word of nuclear in our planning, in the Ministry of Energy, but we have there already, and we will work later on with the National Energy Council and how to proceed further on this initiative. I think that's all, Bob.
Thank you very much, Pak Dadan. I would like to open question from the panelists. If you have some question for Pak Dadan, Pak Satya, Mark, if you have question to Pak Dadan, since Pak Dadan have to leave, Pak Dadan, you still have time to answer some questions?
Yeah, I think 5 minutes before 10, I will leave. But okay. we have Krisnawan here, also the director.
All right. So the panelists, Mark, maybe? You have...
Yes.
Okay, please.
Dr. Dadan, a very exciting presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
I have to ask this question. Of the top 10 countries in the world by population, of the top 10, so far, all but Indonesia and I believe Nigeria are currently constructing nuclear energy or operating nuclear energy. Is it important to Indonesia to be seen as part of that group of countries with nuclear energy, or is that less of a concern in developing energy policy?
Yeah, the kind of the interesting issue. I mean, sometimes we want also to be part of that group. Yeah, but the other reason, why then we have to join with that group if this is not necessary for us? So we have to be in the very logic consideration on this part. Yeah, and everything now is discussed very openly. So that's why the Minister of Energy also support what is the Pak Bob's develop within 2 or 3 years in the country, to have more, but not I mean we will go to nuclear not because we want to be part of that group. We are in the process to go to be one of the member of the group of NPP, probably because we need that one. We have some area, for example, that in West Kalimantan, for example, this area now is importing electricity from Sabah. So we discuss internally, why don't we go with the nuclear in this area? Kalimantan is safe. Yeah. We discuss also other area, for example, Bangka and Belitung. But we don't discuss Java. Well, the social issue is too huge. We're coming to Java, but why don't then we try to develop the policy, the initiative to the area that much more easier and needed for the new electricity. Yeah. So, yeah, that's my response, Mark.
Thank you, Dr. Dadan.
Thank you, Pak Dadan. Do you still have time to answer one more question, Pak Dadan? Or do you have to go?
Well, I think I have 1 more minute.
Okay, 1 more minute. That's good. We have question for Jefferson Siahaan from Sekolah Tinggi Teknologi Bandung, ITB. His question is, what is the strategy for building nuclear power plant in Indonesia? So maybe he wants to know what is the Ministry of Energy strategy in implementing this nuclear power plant. What are the step-by-step strategy? Please, Pak Dadan.
Well, the strategy, I think, as made clear in the national energy planning, midterm of our national energy planning. It has been a step-by-step, year-by-year activities program. Who is PRC? Who is take responsibility for the program? So, if you can back with if you can see with my slide, I will start with the slide through the organizer. You can see that the strategy on on how the government will develop the program on the nuclear.
Yes, it seems that the government has a very step-by-step approach, very strategic to mitigate the risk, minimize the risk, and the increased confidence. That's thank you very much, Dr. Dadan, for his time, and I will let you go since you have things to do. So I think that's the end for our first session. We are very much sorry that Dr. Dadan cannot answer all the questions because he has some pressing agenda to discuss. But we will open later discussion with the government. We have Pak Chris after this for further questions. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite our second speaker. I know the second speaker very well from the Indonesian Business Council. He was the former vice chairman of the Energy Commission in the House of Representatives from previous period. Now he is the member of National Energy Council, Republic of Indonesia. Now, I would like to read his CV, a short CV. He is Dr. Satya Widya Yudha, a politician who is a member of House of Representatives for 2 periods, namely period 2009 to 14 and 2014 to 19, representing Golkar in the electoral district of East Java, that is Tuban and Bojonegoro. He served as Vice Chairman, Commission 7 of the DPRRI 2014-18, in charge of energy and mineral resources, research and technology, and environment. He also served as a Vice Chairman, Commission 1 of the Indonesian Parliament, which is supervising many issues in the defense, foreign affairs, communication, and information and intelligence sector in 2018-19. Dr. Satya Widya Yudha has more than 23 years of experience in oil and gas industry, both at domestic and abroad. His experience was very useful when he was assigned to Golkar Party faction to sit in Commission 7 of DPR and also the Commission of Foreign Affairs Commission 1 of DPR-RI. As the party structure, Dr. Satya Yudha has served several times as chairman of Natural Resources, Energy and Natural Resources sector, and most recently served as Deputy General Treasurer of DPP, Coordinator of Economic Affairs and Golkar. As you can see, Dr. Satya Yudha is very well informed and very well credible in all sector of energy. And certainly now he is a very important person in energy sector because his position as the member of the National Energy Council. Without further ado, Dr. Satya Yudha, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semuanya. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Salam kebajikan. Thank you very much, Pak Bob Effendi, for your introductory remarks about me, and well, I'll talk later about a little bit my background, and I also like to say thank you to Kommun, to the youth community of nuclear. From Yogyakarta. So I saw here Nanda and Hafiz. It's good luck with your study. Hopefully you become success person in the future. And say thank you to Mark Nelson. It's good if you raise your flag to Indonesia, to the Indonesian community. And also, of course, I like also to say thank you to Pak Dadan as a Director General of New and Renewables, also Conservation Energy from Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. And also gathering. I'm from the university, the expert, as well as the policymakers gather, talking about the very sensitive issues about nuclear. Sometimes, people think that nuclear is quite dangerous. Nuclear is something with the explosive. So in this opportunity, I like to let me share my screen, rather than your screen. Can I share from my end?
Yes, we can see your screen. We can share your screen.
Yeah, no. I mean, this is from the committee. So, okay, let me share. Yeah, from my part. Okay, hold on. Yeah. Okay, I think you can see my screen. Yeah.
Yes, we can see your screen.
So the title was asked for me to speak is Nuclear as Clean, Environmentally Friendly, and Sustainable Energy. It is quite a good topic, to be honest, and quite broad. I was listening what Ir.Dadan mentioned, that Indonesia has been involved in the ratification of Paris Agreement. It shows that our commitment on the clean energy. So the appropriate word in the world at the moment, as well as Indonesia, that we are now in the transition period, moving from the fossil fuel to the new and renewable energy everywhere. How far that we participated on the movement, from the fossil fuel to renewables. Of course, from one country to another country has a different step, different conditions, different economic viability to look at, how far that they can move even, faster than the other, or they slow but they committed. So it shows on our commitment on the what's so-called national determined contributions in order for us to cope, to reduce the emission up to 29%, as well as 41% if we have a international aid, by 2030. So coming back to nuclear, because I like here at the beginning as a policymakers to give an audience our understandings about nuclear. We like to see what happened in the world and how far that nuclear power has been used and implemented in the part of in the world. So there are misconceptions so far that nuclear has safety issues. People keep watching what happened in Fukushima, what happened in Chernobyl, with all different stories. But they say that nuclear has some safety issues. The second is nuclear as sunset technology, because that's been used for a long time. And also nuclear is not a solution to climate change. Of course, this misconception about the nuclear power need to be revisited. Why that happened? Why that kind of misperceptions happen to most of the community? Because of once that we plan to build nuclear, of course, we need to get an acceptance from our stakeholders. Community is quite an important part of the stakeholders to accept any kind of technology that will be implemented. Not necessarily to be a nuclear, but it's also any kind of technology that may impact to the life of the people. So here, very good slide. I just got it from resource here, our world in data. If you look at comparison between brown coal, in terms of the death rates, oil, biomass, gas, nuclear. Here is nuclear is basically, we can say that the safest, in the form of the energy generation. If you look at from the number, the death rate, from brown coal, oil, even though probably, arguably, people may challenge that, because of the total of the brown coal power plant is different with nuclear power plant in terms of the, the total install capacity. But if you look at from the number it shows here that nuclear is considered the safest. That's also one of indicator to counter the misperception, like I mentioned earlier on my previous slide. And the second is here, if you look at the growing of nuclear is quite promising. So 2.3% per year. So even in 2019, it's reached the highest ever in the history. Even though there is a little bit slowing down in 2020 and 2000, with all those the accident happened. If you look at Chernobyl in 1986 and 2011 Fukushima, if you look at the number of power plants, I think people has a lesson learned from those major accidents and trying to improve the technology to have. If you look at the United States, it's quite, even though it's not really increased significantly, but they still do. France, China is improving, if you look at here. And Germany is slowing down because they still have a nuclear power plant, but they are promoting renewables, but they still also use coal. Yeah, this is something that we can say also that nuclear is the second largest producer of the clean energy. So the 11 in the room. If you look at 46%, you see, on the total of renewables is coming from hydro, but 36% is from nuclear. So from those charts, I do believe that people tend to starting to believe, at least. So hopefully that community or people who attended this webinar, has a similar understanding with me to read this important slide. So again, it shows that that nuclear is cleaner compared with the other fossil. I mean, was obviously with fossil fuel, but at least among the renewables and new, nuclear is considerably cleaner. And this one is nuclear power is essential if. If the world is to keep global warming to below 1.5 degrees. So again, Indonesia is part of the ratification of Paris Agreement. This number has to be fulfilled, part of the international consensus, because of we are part of it. So Indonesia has to be part of the problem solver, in combating with climate change. So the global warming is one of the indicators that we have to be able to manage our Earth, with 1.5 degrees number. Here, I don't want to accuse a country in the Europe, but at least we can learn some from what happened in France and Germany. There's two countries that probably is very good an example. Yeah, if you look at France, the nuclear, because of their using nuclear, its emission is 80 times lower than Germany. Germany is climate champion, as you may know, in Western Europe, but considered has a dirtiest electricity generation in the European Union. Look at here from the low carbon intensity. If you see 55%, that's what Germany has, with 357 gram carbon intensity per kilowatt hours, and renewable is 42%. Because of nuclear is considered is new, it's not part of the renewable, but new. So if you look at France here, renewable 25%, because of they use the nuclear power stations, the low carbon is 93%. So it's cleaner than Germany. So on those developed country itself, there are scenario and strategy, even though they admit that the energy should shift from fossil fuel to the renewables, but they have their own strategy to phase out some of the fossil fuel and goes to the renewables. And of course, nuclear is one important factor here. If we look at Sweden, do the same way like what France does. Even though the carbon intensity is a bit lower than France, but it's considered high, considered low compared with Germany. And the low carbon is 93%, and then they use the renewables around 59%. That's what I like to, see what the world leader says. And we see the anger face of Macron. They say in the other event that they are France going to phase out the coal-fired plants by 2030. It's quite strong, even though we know it cannot be compared with Indonesia because of France is not the coal producer as big as Indonesia, but that's just their commitment. And they also questioning about what did Germany do when they shut down nuclear. And they add a lot of renewable energy, but they also add a lot of coal, which makes the CO2 footprint worse. So it's quite, opposite with what France does. Because of France, they shut down the power plant, coal-fired plant by 2030. And here, Bill Gates says that nuclear is the only realistic solution to combat climate change. Therefore, I urge world leaders to embrace nuclear. As I mentioned earlier in my previous slide, when they are talking about climate change, quite similar with the commitment of the implementation of the cleaner energy. So nuclear is one of the solutions. At least that's become a bold statement from Bill Gates. President Jokowi, President of the Republic of Indonesia. So he said that we have acquired a lot of energy sources such as water, solar, wind, geothermal. But if this means that nuclear is already needed, then it must be prepared immediately. So this cannot be not decided, that has to be decided, but must be calculated clearly. So in line with what been mentioned earlier with Director General of Renewables, Ir.Dadan, regarding that policy on the implementation stage. We come up to the Indonesia's regulations on nuclear. This is the interesting part. When we are talking about nuclear, we should understand clearly what the regulation says and how do we anticipate in the future. So I think it has been also mentioned by Ir.Dadan earlier about what kind of regulation. So we do have what's so-called the long-term development plan, 2005-2025. This is like a master plan for five terms of the presidency, facing from 2005 to 2025, and mandated the construction of nuclear power plant with high level of safety to meet the electricity needs and its utilization in 2025. So it says here, that with high level of safety. So it's quite, similar with what President Jokowi just mentioned earlier. And also there is a kind of an umbrella of the act, the bills, number 30, 2007, on the energy sector. That all firm energy is equal, and nuclear is part of the new and renewables energy. Because nuclear is new energy, basically. And also on the bill number 10 to 1997 on nuclear energy, mandated to agency. Batam is one of the institutions that give nuclear technical support organization to Bapeten as a nuclear regulator. So Bapeten is like a supervisory body of the nuclear reactors. So the number 4 is government regulations 2014, number 2. Regulation on nuclear installation mandated that non-proven technology can be built as a prototype reactors. I think that's quite important here, you see, because of, again, this still puts safety as the highest factors when we come to the nuclear decision. So for the technology that has not been really proven, that has to be classified as a prototype reactor at the beginning. Until we feel safe, we prove using that kind of technology, then we move to the commercial one. So the government regulation number 79, 2014 on energy policy has been mentioned as well, mandated that minimal 23% of the energy mix should be new and renewable energy by 2025. And by 2050 is ramp up to 31%. And where we are now, and we are now in the 2021, we achieve around 10 to 11%. So we still owe 12 more percent in a very short time frame. So we have to catch up. We have to be able to transfer, and creating the policy that can support to achieve that number. And the second is presidential regulations 2017 on the national energy plan. Yeah, if you look at all the number that mandated that nuclear energy development through the comprehensive assessment on the nuclear power plant utilizations. It was got support from Minister of Research and Technology and also the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources. It goes also to the presidential regulation on the 2020, which is quite recent, number 18 on medium-term development plan, RPGMN. This is usually under new presidency that have a medium-term development plans as part of the presidential vision and missions. So this it says here that put construction of commercial nuclear plant as a priority program. As long as, of course, fall under all those regulations, that we put safety as the highest, priority. And the eighth is the Mineral Energy Minister Resources regulations mandated that preparation to be made in the frame of developing nuclear power plant. And the next, if you look at the Bappenas as a national development planning agency, it says also on the policy brief on nuclear power plants, there was a call policy brief number 1, 2016 on the nuclear power plant. And also, if you look at coming back to the energy law, number 70, 2007, has gave a strong legal foundation for the construction. And without nuclear power plant, target installed capacity 115 gigawatt by 2025 will be difficult to achieve, which will be impacted in the shortage of electricity supply to support economic development. So this is with the projection of the economic growth, of course, reaching by around the 6-7%, even our RUAN or the plant, the national energy plans. It was calculated at the beginning when we introduced in 2017 that the economic projection, the economic growth is around 7 to 8%. Even though now it's quite totally different with the pandemic issues and also with the recent development in the world, it creates the low demand on that. But again, it shows here, if we need to have a higher the installed capacity, far higher than what we have today. So it's quite difficult to achieve if we don't involve the nuclear power. In reality, is quite difficult. So my worry is actually, when our neighbor also built a nuclear power plant to fill that gap. So Indonesia may, being loose if compared with our neighbor, if they do have built a nuclear power plant soon, with all the consequences they have, of course, with all the criteria, pushed by the IAEA. They built it immediately, and we do have a shortage in our country, and quite potential for Indonesia to buy the electricity from our neighbors. That is my biggest worries, So we should consider and calculate it like what President Jokowi mentioned, that if it's necessary, if it's needed, so we have to be careful to handle it because of the safety is paramount, safety is important, then we can finally go to the nuclear. So here I like in this opportunity because of National Energy Council is producing what's so-called the national energy policy, yeah, and it was endorsed, through the government regulation number 79/2014. This is the only government regulation that got endorsed by the parliament. Usually, parliament just only endorse something related to the bill, related to the law, but not for the government regulation. But this special government regulation, number 79/2014, has a special treatment. So what does it mean with nuclear as last options? It says here, it's quite clear. I like to read it. So all the people in this conference, in this webinar, could also have a similar understanding like what I explained here. This provision implies that considering utilization of nuclear energy requires safety standard work and safety, and consider impact of the danger of nuclear radiations to the environment, then its use is considered as a last resort. It means what? If we could tackle with all those issues here, the safety standard, about the safety itself, then we can move from the last resort. We can move to become viable options. So, however, in that study has been carried out regarding the existence of nuclear energy development technology for peaceful purposes, fulfillment of the increasing need for energy increase, the national energy supply on large scale, reduce carbon emission, as well as the existence of national interest, which is urgent, then basically nuclear energy can utilize. So now it's quite clear. Now everybody hope to understand what President Jokowi stands for. And even though here is, there is a word nuclear as last option, but again, with all those requirements, if we could comply with those requirements, then we can move, nuclear become a viable options. So this is, I like to, re-explain, even though has been probably mentioned, touched slightly by Dr. Dadan, in the previous session. So here is quite important to explain about the purpose of the national energy management. You see, Indonesia wants to establish not just sustainable, environmental friendly energy management in order to create national energy independence, just one aspect, national energy security, second aspect, and based on, of course, the way we manage our country here, the energy sovereignty and equitable economic values. When we talk about the energy independence, it means that supply and demand that has to be fulfilled in the country. Then we can declare ourselves, Indonesia, okay, we are independent on energy. But in reality, it's not. We imported fuel product, we imported crude oil, so we are not independent in terms of the supply demand side. How about the national energy security? Yeah, I think that this is the right phrase, that Indonesia is aiming to maintain our national energy security because of this on, at least there are three factors. One is the security of supply. Yeah, we secure the supply. The second one is the accessibility. We do have infrastructure or not. Yeah, if we don't have any infrastructure, we cannot transport our energy. And the third, in terms of to fulfill the national energy security, the third is affordability, that people can afford to buy the energy. So if those three important ones fulfill, then we have nearly achieved the national energy security. The last one is, do we manage our energy with sustainable way, environmentally friendly? Because if we do that, it means that we protect our natural resources for our future generation. Of course, all those components that I just mentioned has to be fulfill with the Indonesian constitutions. Article 33 of the Indonesian constitutions. So that's why we call it the energy sovereignty. So we do have energy sovereignty if the way we manage our natural resources follows what the constitution says. So those are things that quite fundamentals, even though I mentioned earlier to you that, okay, we may have a fulfill our need because we don't want shortage and everything. But again, we have to talk within that kind of framework. This is just to repeat it, what Government Regulation number 79, 2014 about national energy policy. They do have main policy here. So energy provision to meet the national demand, so energy development, utilization of the national energy resources, and national energy reserve. At least there are 4 main policy. What is the supporting policy? Energy conservation, environment and occupational safety, energy price, subsidy, incentive, infrastructure, access to people and energy industry, research and development, application of energy technology. So I think nuclear is fall under that item, and also institutional and funding matters. So those policy basically is the heart of the National Energy Policy number 79, 2014. And those things is implemented through, again, consideration, the balance of the energy economy and security and energy supply and environmental preservations. The priority of providing energy for people who don't have access to energy, and energy development by prioritizing local energy resources. It means what? If one area has huge resources in geothermal, they build the geothermal. But again, if they have shortage because of some reasons, then we have to use the technology in order to fulfill the gap. Yeah, that's the main point. And then the priority is to meet the domestic energy needs. So there is a room for nuclear to be developed, because of the requirement is not prohibit nuclear for the to be developed, but again, we also use the energy resources. What each island in Indonesia, if you may know that Indonesia comprised of thousand islands, so they have the what so-called local wisdom, the local resources. They have to prioritize their local resources. But again, all those principles is based on that we maximizing using the renewable energy by taking into account the economic level. Yeah, we do hope that renewable energy and of course with nuclear as a new energy have a reasonable price that can be afforded by people, and the government love it. And the second is minimizing the use of petroleum. So we are moving from fossil fuel, from the dirty stuff, optimizing the use of natural gas, even the fossil, but the gas is considered cleaner than oil, and new energy, optimizing the use of new energy. Nuclear is one of them, and using coal as the mainstay of the national energy supply. So that is quite why we say this last part. Actually, I don't like to read it, but this is what happened in the Government Regulations number 79. This is because of Indonesia is the major coal exporter. So we have to use coal, for resources if necessary. And this is the shift of the paradigm of the industry. Again, still on the Government Regulation 79, that energy security is achieved by realizing that energy resources is national capital development, not a revenue base. So there will be a multiplier effect because of development of certain energy resources. It cannot be done, like the previous way, where we treat the energy, based on the revenue base. They don't care what kind of development happen on the area where the resources lies, because we tend to export it. And sometimes the people who live in the surrounding the energy resources is left far behind. So we changed the paradigm here. And the second is optimizing the energy use for national economic development. Of course, creation of the added value, absorption of the manpower. So if we are considering that energy as a national capital development. So those are the shifting of the paradigm that has been, already stated in the government regulation number 79/2014. So I don't want to repeat. This has been mentioned by Ir.Dadan. This is just illustrating the new and renewable energy power plant and also fossil fuel power plants and how much they are earning. If you look at from 2050, it's around 443 gigawatt, and 2025 135 gigawatt. So why we need a new energy here? Because of we do believe in order to achieve that number, we should have a kind of energy generations that could fill that gap easily. So nuclear is again one option on that. So this is the national planning, the targeting, like I mentioned, 23% energy mix by 2025, 31% by 2050. But again, this number has to be consistently achieved, by the existing conditions. So we do hope there is a breakthrough for us, because today is, already 2021, but we're just reaching around 11% of it. So we still have another 12%. So this is also tells the same thing. And this has been mentioned earlier with Ir.Dadan about the install capacity here. There is no nuclear, of course, because we haven't started. And this is, the policy for nuclear energy utilization, coming from the energy law, from common regulation, national energy planning, and also presidential decree. So there are a lot of here that mention that nuclear energy is something that we have to consider. Something is have to be calculated carefully because of again the issues on the safety, issues on the understanding how to operate. So those are things that is mentioned on this regulations. So I really interested to see what's the IEA review on Indonesia. That is quite an important part. You see, it started in IEA report in 2009 from 19 points of nuclear energy infrastructure. So in phase 1, 16 items are finished, 3 items need to be prepared. One is national position, second is management, establishment of the nuclear energy program implementing organization, and the third is a stakeholder involvement. So this kind of webinar actually improving the stakeholder involvement, understanding about what's nuclear all about. That is quite important elements. If we want to achieve what IEA recommendation here, I think we Kommun should promote it from time to time to your generations, to everybody, to the community, in order for achieving the requirement from IAEA, stakeholders involvement. So where we are now from the nuclear power plant development stage, here on the phase 1, this is our current position at the moment. And comprised of 16 factors, like in the previous slide, and 3 more to go. So in order for us to move from phase 1 to phase 2. So this is again on what's happened on the on the medium term of planning, according to Presidential Decree number 18/2020. So the development of nuclear power plant in the West Kalimantan is pursued as an option for providing electricity in the future. I think this one is, everybody needs to understand. They have a plan, the locations on the nuclear power plants in West Kalimantan. It's been mentioned on the presidential decree number 18, 2020. So it means what? It means that there is an opportunity for developing of nuclear power plants. The government sees, it's a quite recent regulations. Even though there is a condition, of course, like I mentioned earlier, IAEA has a condition. President also mentioned there is a condition, to be fulfilled in terms of safety, in terms of the, the technology that we are going to use. But again, the opportunity is there. And also, of course, the support from, Batam because it's considered as an institution who has a research powerhouse project on the nuclear power plants. And what's the conclusions from my talking, already probably more than 20 minutes, is nuclear is clean, definitely, environmentally friendly, and sustainable energy. I think everybody here tend to agree from what I mentioned earlier to you, what happened in the global world, and realizing what happened for the country who has a nuclear power plant already. And it shows that it doesn't, nuclear doesn't burn, but split atom, therefore does not emit any carbon emission or NH4. And it requires the least land as a footprint. This does not disrupt the ecosystem. Everybody knows with a small area, but they do have a big capacity. The third is it requires the least material to build because of its very small facility compared with others, and the least amount of mining for fuel. Of course, there is no, no extraction like what we have done in the coal, for instance. It has the least amount of waste stream and manage its waste from cradle to grave. Even though there is a huge debate on the waste of the nuclear, but again, once that we enter to that area, we should also be careful to calculate about waste issues. And the last point is here, it doesn't harm or kill wildlife while operating. Yeah, they are very closed system, so it's quite safe, by surrounding. So this is the recommendations. Yeah, the National Energy Council, the institution that I'm now in, should review what's so-called national energy planning and also national energy general planning. In particular, again, the more realistic macroeconomic assumptions. As you may know that, the president's decree back in 2017, this is based on the macroeconomic assumptions, quite optimist. Our economic growth is around 7 to 8%. So time for us, to change it, to rethink it, to make more realistic from the development of, Indonesia in the future. Even though, and the article of National Energy Planning, based on the presidential, the government regulation number 79, is allowable because of that can be reviewed at earliest 5 years and changes in the strategic environments. So to review it's possible. And the second one is effort that should be conducted by Indonesia according to IEA standard. I mentioned it earlier, but it shows here about the step need to be taken. So determine the standing position and action plan for nuclear development in Indonesia, collaborating in the implementation of activities, institution, and funding and preparation of nuclear power plant development. There needs to be harmony, between the nuclear, between new and renewable energy draft law, because of the bill now is being drafting, by the parliaments, as well as with the government and parliament there, and the revision of the nuclear law, and building the NPT using a small modular reactors technology, especially in the industrial area, with the advantage of being able to adjust to needs, for example, 4 times 50 megawatt. So National Energy Council and stakeholders will discuss institutional readiness and national nuclear power plant development plans with material including dissemination on safety, reliability, independence of the energy security, establishing NEPIO, and also proposing 7 prospective members of the MTPN, and according to the provision of the Presidential Regulation number 83, 2014. Those are, concluding my speech here. So hopefully we touch the ground. We know how to solve the problem. We know what the obstacles, or we know how the governments and policymakers will do, and realizing that nuclear will give us an opportunity to improve our install capacity. If the economic growth is high, if Indonesia become developed country in 2050, become the 5 biggest economy countries, for 2050, I think we should answer with the fulfillment of the energy sectors in the future. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satya Yudha. Dr. Satya Yudha has presented basically saying that there is no regulation that prohibits nuclear power plant, and that the Indonesian government right now currently is considering nuclear power as a viable options. Now, Dr. Satya, let me ask you the first questions, if I may, that in the PP79, you shed a very light, all this time that nuclear has been considered as the last options, that the narrative has been as if that you ran out of all form of energy, then after you ran out of a form of energy, then you consider nuclear. But as you point out in the explanation, that is not how it is supposed to meant, right? So it is meant that you need to do extensive study, calculation, consideration, and there is an urgent needs. Now, my question is to you, if there is an urgent need, what do you think the number one urgent needs, the single most important urgent need, why we need nuclear power plant? That's my first question. And my second question is that you mentioned viable option even in when you were hearing with the legislative during the fit and proper test, right? Yeah. And you said that the PP79 is up for revisions. The question is the National Energy Council, which you are a member now, is considering to revise the last option into a viable options? Those are the 2 questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Satya.
Well, yeah. So that's why I, a little bit careful when I explain about the nuclear as a last options based on the Common Regulation 79, 2014. So I just translated into English here. What does it mean on the explanation of Article 11, Paragraph 3? Because there is a misperceptions around, people understand about what does it mean with the last options. Like you mentioned, people assume, probably also, most of the people don't read it carefully, assume that last option means that we have to use up all the resources beforehand. If we run out coal, we run out fuel, we run out renewables and everything, then this nuclear has become option. But in reality, if we look at this, from the word make us and everybody confused, it shows here, you see, it says that the considering the utilization of nuclear energy requires safety standard work. Safety and consider impact of the danger of the nuclear radiation to the environment. So if we could, it means that if we could comply with all those requirements, then we can consider that nuclear is not the last resort. So you see, so the revision of the Common Regulation 79, that's to be more clear, using that kind of word. Otherwise, give us a different perception, misconceptions. As you may know that even on the IEA, term and conditions about Indonesia, progress on the nuclear development. It says here that the stakeholders' involvement, get acceptance from the stakeholders. So we don't want that our stakeholders, people, will interpret differently. So we should, ask you and also all those people here who live in Indonesia who really champion on the nuclear power plants and understanding the regulation. We should give enough understanding to the people, to the people basically, because of that kind of facility will not be built if the people is not buy-in. The government will be considered wrongdoing if they don't really take into account what the people aspirations and what the people understanding about nuclear. That's become issues. So that's why I like to read it down here. So make everybody now understand. So as long as we're promoting about the safety factors, we're promoting about the safety standard, that we are safe enough, that we are capable enough to operate. And there will be no impact on the danger of nuclear radiation because we are considering the safety at the first place. That's a bit different result, Pablo. You see?
Thank you, man. Yes.
Otherwise, we fail. I mean, it shows that our failure to educate people, to educate the government and policymakers. So, me as a member of National Energy Council, we like to see it in reality. Everybody works together, to get acceptance from the people. That is a common problem wherever you are in the world, because I visited, Japan, I visited France. The first thing what they mentioned to me is basically now it depends on the people. They do have representatives there. They have to tell their constituents. They have to get an understanding about this. What's the impacts and what's the benefit to have it? If they are all agreed, then that is become real.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satya. One last thing is there are 8 members in the National Energy Council. You are one of them. My question is, does the other 7 members share your vision or your thinking about nuclear power plant?
Yeah, that is a very good thing, though, because of, from 8 members, at least 2 of them are the expert of the nuclear technology.
Yes.
I'm not the expert of the nuclear technology. My background is more on the oil sectors, on the offshore engineering by education. So I've been spending my time as the oil and gas expert, in the multinational corporation. So, but my colleagues, 2 of them are, day to day is on the nuclear sectors. One of them used to be the president director of Bapeten. So at least he knows, they know, us, because I'm discussing. Before I presenting this, slide, all the critical item has been discussed to those, gentlemen. So trying to get the feedback because they know the technology, they know, how to implement it. So, but again, like the word on the government regulations about the proven technology, I think that is quite fair, though. So people, easy to buy in because we don't want to play around with this. So we assume that if you could, whoever going to build later on could really explain it to the authority that this is a technology is proven and this is technology is considerably, other country use it or being, being what's so-called like assessed by the authority in other part of the world, in other country. This is something that we could put into table. But if it's not, there is a room, to be built and proof under the Badan supervision. So that's what the government says under Badan supervision. But when it comes to the commercial, so you have to pass this, this step first, and then goes to the commercial phase. But again, all about is basically the way we handle carefully with all those plan And then it's been mentioned also by IAEA. So very much in line, Bob, if you look at it from the government standpoint.
Right. Now, before we go into the questions from the audience, I would like to give, Mark, you have question for Dr. Satya?
No, I was really enjoying the perspective and trying to put some spirit of your approach for Indonesia into the questions I've been typing and the answers I've been typing for the audience. But no, go ahead.
Okay, so then I'll go through the question, Dr. Satya. There's several questions from the audience. Number one, from Rianto Raharjo. He asks, what is the Indonesian government expectation on nuclear power plant financing? Who will pay? Majority by the government or majority by private sector, including foreign company, or is there other options? Please, Dr. Satya.
Oh, well, okay. I should quote what Mr. Bambang Brojonegoro says here. He's one of the member of National Energy Council as well. He's a Minister of Planning at the time, when he was a minister. Now he become Minister of Research and Technology. And fortunately, he's also part of the then member, National Energy Council member. So everybody probably don't know the member of National Energy Council. We do have 7 ministers, included Minister of Energy as what's so-called like a managing directors, M.Sc on the National Energy Council, and 7 ministers. One of them is Mr. Bambang. Even under his previous post is also from the State Planning Agency, and then now he's moved to Minister of Research Technology. So he said here, nuclear yes, but no state budget. For me, is and in my this is my own opinion. I like to see it from all those requirements need to be fulfilled first. Then we are talking about the financing, you see, because of the biggest part is there. Financing is, I think, will follow. Once that the governments say go for nuclear, quite clear, yes, part of their directions. I think there will be a lot of investors to look at Indonesia and jump in and wants to participate on the development. So I think what Pak Bambang mentioned here is quite reasonable. If no state budgets, but can be financed by others.
So if we look at Pak Bambang's statement there, it states that the government are hoping for private sector to participate in the development of nuclear power plant.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's quite obvious here.
Right. All right. So now another question from Brawijaya University, from Haisanatul Fikrial. She said that approximately how many years from now Indonesia will start developing nuclear energy? What's your take on that, Dr. Satya?
Yeah, I think I should come back also to the requirement from IAEA here. Yeah, this is the step that we have to fulfill. Okay, hold on. Yeah, this is the question is we are on the phase 1. Yeah, at the moment, phase 1 consists of what? Consists of this. You see, 19 points of nuclear energy infrastructure in phase 1. Just to make a decision, go nuclear. 16 items are finished, then 3 items need to be prepared. So if we do finalize the A, B, and C here, say very soon, then we started to say about go nuclear, and we goes to the phase number 2. I think he's quite a clear mention here. Yeah, on the phase 2 and phase 3, at least 10 to 15 years. So we're coming back to how do we finalize the phase 1 first? If we could finalize soon, then plus 10 to 15 years.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Satya. That's quite a long way to go. But if we don't start now, it will never happen.
Never. You're right.
So we need to start, and it just take whatever it takes. So now another question, maybe last question before we move on, and from UGM, University Gadjah Mada, the government doesn't talk about the environmental enough. How can we believe the policy that they are making if they are not seem committed at all?
Well, I think I don't think so, because of I think it's clearly mentioned, and at least on my presentations, that the nuclear is environmentally friendly, then the cleanest, and it's quite clear here, and there is no such a rejection from the government in terms of that. Yeah, more on the safety issues, more on the safety standards, more on the technology that we are going to use. I think they do, observe on those kind of developments. From the environmental side, it has been mentioned clearly here that, it's quite clean, closed system, and just required very small area, small land compared with the other mining activities. And that's what my understanding. And also the record in the world, it shows as well that is the cleanest. Even though I like to, this is because this is not 10 record, but at least this is the world record about the safety issues, about the death rates from the energy production from terawatt hours. It shows here that nuclear is considerably lowest. So I think we should exercise here. So all those background is quite important background for us at the National Energy Councils, to look at all the possibility. You see, all those are record from other part of the world, of course. Here as well. And this is, like I mentioned to you, about the environment. So my 2 cents here is basically, everybody has to be aware. Everybody has to make other people aware. And let's make a understanding of nuclear has become everybody concerned. Everybody needs. You see, not only belong to the expert, not only belong to the academia, but belong to all the people involved. And again, this is also part of the recommendation from IAEA.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satya. With that, we close the question and answer and move on to the next speaker. Thank you very much, Dr. Satya, for your time and your cooperation in giving your speak in this forum. I hope that next time we can do the same to further shed more lights on nuclear. So I hope you'll still be attending the seminar, Dr. Satya? Because,
I'll try to do my best,
All right, because the next speaker is what is waited, Mr. Mark Nelson. Mark is the founder for Stand Up for Nuclear. I think he was trained as a nuclear engineer, and I'll just let Mark tell something about himself first, Mark. And without further ado, I will give the floor to you, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ball. Yes, I was trained as actually I went to undergraduate in Oklahoma for aerospace and mechanical engineering. My university did not have nuclear, but I can tell any of you young people on this call that actually a surprisingly small number of people in the global nuclear industry have nuclear engineering degrees. Many people do have engineering degrees, but mechanical engineering plus a little bit of reactor physics, or civil engineering plus a little bit of specialty construction. There are many paths towards nuclear, so don't worry if you're worried you're not in a nuclear-related discipline. There is always room, always time to switch and aim for nuclear energy. So I switched to nuclear energy in graduate studies. I studied in the United Kingdom, And it was an unusual thing, but I did not go into engineering. I wanted to work on nuclear plants in the UK, but at the time it was difficult for me as a foreigner to secure a position. So I went back to America and I got into energy policy with an internship at the Breakthrough Institute in California, and then left to work with Mr. Michael Schellenberger at Environmental Progress in California. And I did prepare a few slides that mention that in the perspective of nuclear as clean energy, but you'll have to remind me whether there's time in the schedule to show those.
All right, you have 30 minutes, Mark.
All right, well, I will give my slides, and of course I will be very eager to have questions either in written format, and in which case afterwards I can always answer with typing, or I can be asked live by Mr. Bob. All right, I will share the screen. This is a picture taken by Michael Schellenberger in 2015 that has a very deep meaning for all of us who have worked in environmental progress in Berkeley, California. Michael visited Indonesia as part of a world tour to understand the role of energy in the lives and the aspirations of people with very different levels of prosperity already. In Indonesia, he met a woman, Matun, who, with her daughter, was gathering snails to sell in the market. Michael is a very unusual person in wanting to talk to almost anybody, having an immense amount of curiosity about all people in the world. And he asked Matun whether they were gathering snails to eat, and that's how he found out they were gathering it to sell. Why to sell? Because Matun had a driving goal to get her daughter an education and a good life. And he asked her, would you be doing this even if you had an option? And the answer was no. The goal is to get an education and to get to the city to get a better life for Matun's daughter than Matun had for herself. What does all that have to do with nuclear energy, you might ask? Well, in Environmental Progress, which I left about 1.5 years ago, it became one of the images that sat at the center of our vision for why nuclear is critical for nations all over the world, but especially for a country like Indonesia. Here's another series of images that Michael took in the Democratic Republic of Congo on a visit he made. Kind of the excuse was to go see the gorillas of the Congo, but it turned into a powerful experience in environmental progress for himself, which he ended up naming his new organization. So this is a young girl carrying a bunch of wood. That wood is for turning into charcoal to burn in households. Here are children who, instead of being at school, are hauling this charcoal to market in bags on their head. This is the primary energy harvested directly from forests where some of the most precious and rare animals in the entire world live. And these children are hauling an amount of energy that if I here in Chicago, United States, went to my bathroom and turned on the faucet, this amount of energy could come out over, let's see, for the small bag of coal on the child to the left, that would be, a hot bath of, in the tub. That would be that amount of energy. And instead, he's going to walk for maybe an hour, and he's going to use that charcoal, which itself was harvested from trees at the edge of the forest preserve. And here's a gorilla, one of our closest relatives, along with, of course, one of the most famous animals in the world, the orangutan. But the mountain gorilla of Democratic Republic of Congo is threatened, severely endangered. And this gorilla is an orphan. Why? Because her parents were shot by illegal charcoal processors. Why did they shoot? Because the park rangers went back on their agreement to allow illegal harvesting of wood from the forest, and that battle led to violence and retribution on both sides, and the animals and the people were all the victims, all for an amount of energy that is almost trivial to supply with modern sources. And yet the people suffer, the animals suffer, the forests suffer, and because it's charcoal, the climate will suffer. Where do we go from here? Well, first, let's take a look and see where Indonesia lines up against other countries on energy. This is a very interesting chart, also put together by our World in Data, as we saw from Mr. Satya, where we see Indonesia, at least in 2015, right in the center on a logarithmic chart, not linear, but logarithmic chart of the energy use in society on the y-axis versus the GDP per capita in US dollars on the x-axis. What we see here is it's not an absolutely deterministic story of use more energy, get richer, or get richer, use more energy, but it is pretty darn close on this messy data from 200 different countries. So what is it we're trying to see? We're trying to see in Indonesia that in terms of prosperity and human development goes from there to there. Let's look at this another way. Energy usage and share of population in extreme poverty. We've got Indonesia right here again in this critical spot, right in the bend, right? Just like it before, it was in the center. Right here is where Indonesia is. From where will Indonesia go? Where will Indonesia go? I think we can all agree here that a goal would be, both in terms of environmental impact and social development, for Indonesia to go upwards with a further reducing share of people in poverty like Matun, and for a level of development and well-being approaching that of other nations that are not so far away, like Japan. But how do we get there in a world where international agreements, binding commitments, as binding as international commitments can be, are being put into place voluntarily by nations to reduce carbon dioxide? You're not going to get there with charcoal from the forest, certainly. You may definitely find that coal is one way to get richer, which will lift people out of poverty, but it has the disadvantage, well known, of having a severe shared environmental impact on planet Earth. So that's where we get to some of the simplest arguments one could ever make for nuclear energy. Of course, Mr. Satya has made these points in different ways, so in a way I'm saying this again. But in other ways, considering the lack of expert consensus truly around the world on the importance of nuclear, perhaps there can be no limit of us saying it over and over, learning it for ourselves and talking about it to other people. Here's a chart that shows the hour-by-hour performance of Germany's electricity system in 2018 versus its close neighbor, France. Both countries have nearly the same amount of people. France is a bit less. They produce nearly the same amount of energy. But yet, because of the choice of the bedrock technology, the foundation energy technology difference between France and Germany, they're experiencing very different things when trying to meet the Paris Accords. Germany fluctuates up and down like a leaf in the wind based on the weather. Is there good fortune to have sun and wind? Is there bad fortune to have cold, darkness, and calm air? Well, in France, good and bad weather barely moves the needle. Why? Because of their foundation of nuclear energy. Let's see another way to put it. This is again in 2018. The numbers are a little bit different. Germany's clean percentage has gone up a little bit, but considering that Germany is about to shut down all of its remaining nuclear plants, which are the strongest and most productive of its remaining fleet, we should probably expect to see Germany fall back over the next few years on carbon performance. So perhaps you can forgive me for having just 2018 data here. The choice is clear, however. Germany gets the majority of its electricity supply from burning and of course almost all of its other energy from burning both biomass and fossil fuels, whereas France gets almost 40% of its energy supply from electricity, of which the overwhelming majority is clean, and of that, the overwhelming majority is clean from nuclear. You might think that this means, since we've heard that nuclear is something maybe you go to last after you've looked at other options, that France must be paying so much money for this technology as developed. But in fact, we find the opposite is true. As Germany has been adding cheaper and cheaper wind and solar, it finds it still must pay to keep up the rest of its power plants because, of course, as we saw, the wind and the clouds go away. And then many experts, they get PhDs, they study for a long time, and they say, we already know about these things. And yet, they tie themselves into all sorts of traps, trying to explain how you turn this Germany into France, even if you slowly lower the performance, you slowly lower the carbon emissions from Germany in some hours of the year. That brings us to this. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in its 2014 report has already accepted the evidence that nuclear is low carbon. Because Dr. Satya covered this, I think it's less important for me to go over it. So let's go forward to something quite interesting. If you have any limitations on land, suddenly something very new comes into play. That is the energy density of nuclear as a fuel source as used in a nuclear plant. Now, you might say nothing lives in the desert. Well, that would be false, of course. Much lives in the desert. And of course, much flies in the desert. These plants have been found to be quite lethal to birds that fly into the concentrating solar rays. Now, you might say, well, most solar will be not this type, it will be solar PV. Understandable, but the limit is still there on the maximum energy you can gather over the course of a year from any given plot of land. Now, Indonesia does not look like this. This is one of the driest deserts in the world. In California, this is not what Indonesia looks like. Any acre of land lost in Indonesia is an acre perhaps of absolute treasure of biodiversity and social diversity even. And to use that land indiscriminately for solar when you would have to build an entire backup energy system anyway, instead of going for nuclear, well, that's going to be a more difficult argument to make on the basis of the environment, to be sure. So that brings us to one of the questions we've gotten at least several times tonight. I've been typing answers. They've had to put me on mute because I type too loudly. But what about the waste? To me, this boils down to something very, very simple. The waste, it looks like this. This is my colleague, and if you really have to say somebody runs Stand Up for Nuclear, I'd say she's the one that keeps everybody together around the whole world. I am very proud to work with her, and she's the one that makes sure that everybody around the world has what they need to show their love for nuclear, whether it's in Indonesia and it's online, or it's Belgium and it's hundreds of plant workers standing up to save their nuclear energy facilities. Well, here's Paris, and she's standing with pride next to the nuclear waste. When we went to visit this nuclear plant in Arizona, she said, I'm only going if I can go see the waste. So I asked, can we go see the waste? And they said, okay, we'll see if we can add the waste to your tour. And they added the waste to the tour. And Paris tweeted this out, a picture of her with the waste, and it was seen millions of times. It was shared over 1,000 times. And people around the world, and she didn't sit here and explain, oh, the dosage is so low, I'm getting more radiation from the sun, and it's safe for hundreds of years. You would need an entire military tank to come in to haul away the waste. There's just no way she needs to explain that when she just leans up against the waste and says, what's your issue? Here it is, in the sun. But I have to say, the Dutch have gone even further. Let's see what the Dutch do. Yes, the Dutch have public tours in their art museum with tapestries in the same place they store all of the nuclear high-level waste they have ever generated in one little building. It looks like this. And it should not surprise us at all that people in the Netherlands have learned to embrace nuclear. In fact, over the past few years, we've seen an amazing rebirth of excitement for nuclear in the Netherlands. People are not just talking about extending the life of Netherlands, of the Dutch nuclear plant that I was able to visit 2 years ago for the pandemic, but also they are saying, perhaps we should build more. And then in Germany, they're saying, wait, I thought we already decided that nuclear is bad. And the Dutch are saying, no, we like nuclear energy. We think we'll have it. I did mention this earlier in the call, and I thought I'd go through and say, what are other countries doing? China has got nuclear and has turned into the biggest builder of nuclear plants in the whole world. India has got nuclear. In fact, an incredible success story has just come out of India, where the first of their 700 megawatt indigenously designed, indigenously built nuclear plants has come online. And at the moment, we need to confirm this, at the moment, the capital cost for this nuclear plant appears to be under $2 billion per gigawatt. That's exceptional. That's exceptional. And if its operational record turns out to match even that of the other Indian nuclear plants, that will be extremely good priced power indeed. And since they're building over a dozen more of these identical 700 megawatt units, I think we have a great deal of hope that we're seeing one of the true bursts of a developing nation nuclear program for environmental protection, for economic development, for social development, and of course, to go a long way to beginning to meet Paris climate goals for India. United States, where nuclear energy was invented. Skipping over Indonesia for now. Pakistan has got nuclear energy. They're about to significantly expand their fleet with the coming online, perhaps in a year or two, of some Chinese-built pressurized water reactors outside of Karachi. Brazil has got nuclear, even though they've got some of the greatest hydro reserves in the world. They have a single dam. They have a single dam that makes almost 100 terawatt hours per year, and they still have a nuclear program. And are looking for ways to finish their third nuclear reactor that's been under construction. Nigeria does not yet, but they've been interested. Bangladesh is interesting. Only a few years ago, they started construction of a Russian reactor, and they've just put their head down. They've been working hard on it. Rosatom is pushing ahead well. Bangladeshi workers are working very well on it. And it looks like we're about 2 years away, 2 or 3 years away from that nuclear plant opening. And already the people and government of Bangladesh are looking at a second plant. They have big dreams, big dreams. Russia, where the deliverers of nuclear to much of the world right now. And finally, Mexico, of course, is also blessed with extremely well operating General Electric boiling water reactors at Laguna Verde. So that's all of my official talk. I just wanted to share some of the excitement that we feel working on Stand Up for Nuclear, because you know what, it's infectious. For the young people on this call, in your own time, you can deliver for your country something like what we've been hearing about in that conversation, in my presentation. Certainly stay dedicated and focused in your studies. Tell your family about nuclear energy. Tell your friends about nuclear energy. No one's going to come and do it for you other than the young generation of Indonesia. Push respectfully with awareness that people older than us have been through lots of experiences. And even if nuclear is new and strange to them, with time and some careful and polite discussion, they may come to appreciate your perspective and even capture a little bit of excitement for themselves. But again, it's up to you. And the Stand Up for Nuclear movement is, of course, here to help. And it's been an absolute delight to be able to speak to you tonight.
Thank you very much, Mark. While we're waiting for the audience to give you questions, let me ask you questions. Now, as you probably know, one of the two countries, if we can say countries, if you can say California countries, you know, size of a country, that's closest nuclear power plant is Germany and California, right? And probably they replace all the nuclear power plant both in Germany and in California as well with renewables, right? I mean, Germany has like close to 40% renewables, and California approximately maybe 30%, right? And tell us what's going on with California grid, and then it's rolling blacks out, and now we learn about Texas that they have no power now. All the windmills are frozen. Thousands of people is dying because of no heat. So tell us your experience in California. I mean, about this issue of closing down nuclear power plant and what's happening with the reliability of your grid, of California grid.
Yes, thank you. It's a very important set of questions. And I lived in California for 4.5 years and only moved away a few weeks ago to Chicago, Illinois. So I was fortunately away from California during the blackouts. And so I just paid attention and studied and followed up on them from afar. But here's what's happened. About at the time of the blackout, California had invested in it $70 billion USD in solar. And every year, more solar investment, and the solar got cheaper and cheaper. The $70 billion of solar became worthless on that August evening when the sun went down. Energy supplies were not sufficient, even with almost every gas plant in the state going full out with that cheap natural gas that America is so blessed with, or at least has been. And it wasn't enough. And then California desperately tried to buy electricity from other states, but those other states were hot too. And of course, California is the last land before you get to the Pacific. The sun's crossing over. Arizona had no more to give, no solar to give. Nevada, no solar to give. Oregon, Washington, no solar. And the hydroelectricity they were giving maxed out. Then the wind, the grid operators, almost like in a society that worships the natural elements, the grid operators prayed for wind. Literally, metaphorically, I don't even know. For all we know, they had to say prayers for wind, and they did not get it. So the $16 billion of wind turbines in California did not supply. And the grid turned off in one of the richest areas that the world has ever known in any time or place. And so the problem here is that the future energy plan, if let's say they go through and they fix the signaling issues and they fix the grid issues and they put in do all sorts of clever things to tell people to stop using so much energy, in a country where that should be one of the hallmarks of a prosperous society, to be able to use energy to cool yourself down when it's hot. Well, they're going to institute new processes to make sure to limit energy consumption among people. And then they have the problem that all the power plants that bailed them out, that even kept them from having a general collapse of the grid, are the same natural gas plants that they claim to be needing to get rid of. And so you see how the need to keep ourselves alive runs directly into the goals we have for the environment if we get rid of nuclear. Now, California has been working on getting rid of its nuclear for a very long time. There was Humboldt Bay plant up north. There was Rancho Seco plant near Sacramento, the capital. One of the major, most important power plants in the United States in terms of delivering exactly the energy needed where it was needed was Song's San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station, halfway between San Diego and Los Angeles. All of these were removed decades, if not a full century, before they had to be removed. And in each case, they were replaced immediately with natural gas, and over time, some amount of renewables dipped into the natural gas. Except something's very strange has happened recently. The amount of renewables produced by California seems to be running into kind of a barrier, at least in terms of percentage, in terms of raw production of renewables. It's a little wavy, but it's still going up a little bit. Because California has chosen to make a political decision to try to shut the final remaining nuclear plant. It is now facing an absolute emergency to replace not just the power that was needed this past August when the blackouts hit, but also to replace Diablo Canyon. And I know I'm not surprising you when I say the same regulators and politicians in California that say we must decarbonize, at the moment they decide what replaces Diablo Canyon, they of course have to go for a definition that can only truly include natural gas or natural gas power that's going to be stored in batteries. And that's the only choice. Fortunately, we have so many countries around the world doing the opposite. Germany is being more clever, but a little bit insidious when you think of what they say to the world and what they try to come and sell to the world. I know that almost every country I've been involved in has German business people coming to speak at the highest levels of business and just government, let's just be honest, to say, you don't need those nuclear plants from our competing business countries, you need our renewables. But at home, what did the Germans do? At home, Germans have almost totally stopped any new construction of wind turbine in their country. In fact, out of desperation, the energy ministry, the government has said, well, here's a plan to take our national forests and put wind turbines in them. Because who can block it in a national forest? Yeah, it destroys the whole idea of a national forest, but it at least would go forward. At the moment, though, people are pushing back, and it's not clear there's going to be more wind turbines in Germany. So is it solar? Well, they're kind of limited. At the moment, they're hitting close to the maximum of solar they can have on the summer days, but of course they have long winters, so it doesn't matter how much solar you add for the summertime, you're gonna not have much of it in the winter. And sure enough, this winter has been very bad for German solar. Production in January and February is down about 50%, 60% compared to last year. Why? It's just cloudy. But since Germany has a trick up its sleeve, it hasn't mattered. What's that trick Germany has up its sleeve? Somehow, they've managed to keep a gigantic coal fleet in reserve. That coal fleet last year operated less than 18% of total capacity. 18% for more than 20 gigawatts of coal. You try that in Texas, all the coal plants will go bankrupt and they'll be off and you'll have a different sort of blackout. Germany's more clever. They've kept their fossil fuel infrastructure ready for that day when people just don't care that much about carbon. Now, I got to tell you, that's a very grim vision because there's a lot of carbon going up. And despite the need for countries around the world to develop, we are playing a very dangerous experiment with the atmospheric composition. And furthermore, even if a country, say a developing country says, oh, we don't care about carbon, businesses, companies, and banks in the rest of the rich world still do, meaning they can limit investment to you. They can limit your development. They can try to tell you what to do. They can say, no loans for you unless you make it German solar made in China. And maybe that's okay for some countries, but it is a very dangerous trap to get into when even Germany doesn't believe in it. Think of that. Even Germany doesn't believe it enough to turn off their coal plants. And yet they're selling it. They're selling it. Be very careful listening to what people say. You should watch what they do. Instead, Germany is prioritizing getting rid of 6 of the greatest single reactors on planet Earth. The most productive single reactor in the world is Grunde. And you can see this on the rail line between Amsterdam and Berlin. You will see this gorgeous nuclear plant, beautiful ball, beautiful cooling tower in the most beautiful valley. Just fields of flowers as far as the eye can see when I passed it in the autumn 2 years ago. It's just majestic sight. It just surpassed 400 terawatt hours for a single reactor. And that reactor is not done. It could do 1,000 terawatt hours. It could last for another 60 years based on what we are currently witnessing in reactor pressure vessels for the metallurgy.
Right.
And yet they're closing it all.
Right. Mark, having said all that about the carbon emission, I mean, we know that Germany emission has rising, right? In fact, it has met he has missed its target. Now, what about California?
Careful, Bob. It has shrunk partly from the pandemic, but partly because they've been so slow to close their reactors.
Right. What about California?
It has gone down a bit, but
what about California? Has it met its carbon reduction emission compared to the national U.S. average? Has it paced off?
It's going very slow compared to reductions in carbon in the rest of the U.S. The rest of the U.S. is making much more rapid progress than California. And it's happening for a number of reasons. One of the critical ones, not just in terms of reduction so far, but in my opinion, and looking at the grid, in future possibility of reduction, has been getting rid of its nuclear. But what you're going to find, any country rich enough to do something like strip out working nuclear plants is going to just decide it doesn't care about carbon. That's more of something that they're going to limit, say, Indonesian development and financing, and say it's carbon's your fault. We did our part. We helped develop solar and wind. Now it's Indonesia's turn to suffer a little and make up for what we refuse to do for ourselves, which is decarbonize properly by keeping our nuclear plants and expanding them.
Right. This is an interesting question from the audience, Mark. You're saying that one of the founder, Mark Schellenberger, was an environmentalist before, right? And he moved over to nuclear, right? To support nuclear. Now, the questions in regard with one of the most famous environmental NGO, which is Greenpeace, right? The audience question is, why Greenpeace hate nuclear? They are spreading anti-nuclear propaganda for the sake of environment, while we promoting it is also for sake of environment. And isn't America bail out from nuclear? So why is Greenpeace hates nuclear so much, Mark? Can you explain that?
That is an extremely good question, a very perceptive question. And it's one that Michael Schellenberger worked on for a very long time. I was lucky enough to help him research it. As far as we can tell, it's this. Greenpeace would cut down every last tree and every rainforest in the world if it meant getting rid of nuclear energy. Every single one of their environmental goals comes after and only if not in conflict with getting rid of nuclear. What nuclear? This is the key part. All nuclear. In other words, Greenpeace, deep in its DNA as an organization, in its funding, and its reason for existing, feels that there's this link between nuclear war and nuclear energy. It's not one that Greenpeace spends any effort trying to untangle. It's not important to Greenpeace what the link is or isn't. Is it real? Is it not? Irrelevant. It's a different conversation for a different time. For Greenpeace, it's the same thing. And Greenpeace hasn't accomplished a damn thing in trying to get rid of nuclear weapons. They can't. It just won't occur. I don't think you'd ever meet somebody in Greenpeace who thinks that they could do that. But they've been very successful fighting against nuclear energy, and they put up an especially well-funded and well-resourced and intense attack in developing countries, because there's nothing they hate more than a success story in energy and environmental protection for nuclear in a developing country. I would imagine that some younger people in Greenpeace are very confused about why the older people and the funders and everything are so odd about nuclear energy. I've run into Greenpeace people who were just gathering signatures for the money, and they just didn't even know about this whole nuclear thing. And then they said, that sounds good. And then they inevitably talk to their managers, their directors, their funders, and what the message passed on is, no, never, shut up. No, the nuclear is bad. It's just bad, you know? Now, I think there are other extremely large, incredibly well-funded and resourced, like multi-$100 million per year organizations in the US, many of them based in California, that are like sort of kind of having issues thinking about nuclear, partly because all their younger staff and all their lower level managers are just not that concerned about nuclear. And they're trying to ask, wait, why is the nuclear plant so? Then they're like, that is it's becoming more delicate and risky to be seen in public against nuclear. Greenpeace doesn't have this issue.
So, Mark,
they almost by definition attract the dollars and the people that have one goal, and that's to stop all nuclear. And because they can't do the other, they just stop all nuclear energy.
So Mark,
answer your question.
Yeah, let me get this clear. So in your opinion, Greenpeace anti-nuclear position, it is not at all about environmental. Is that your position?
No, nothing. Yeah, I mean, look, the area around nuclear plants is extraordinarily abundant and vibrant. Partly it's just because people are kept out by the fence or whatever. I think it's unnecessary to keep a fence that far out. But even this is the weird place we can go with this discussion. Even in the places where there is a nuclear accident, what we see is an extraordinary rebound. It's not the accident that causes it. It's just people staying away allows nature to go and pop and return. That's not an argument for not being safe about nuclear reactors, mind you. But even on the safety thing, it's just, a plant like Chernobyl operated for 14 years after the accident. Even the very next year after the accident happened, the plant set a new production record. And then again the year after that. And then again the year after that. So whatever it has happened in Chernobyl, at least Chernobyl, did I say? Anyway, at Chernobyl, it wasn't enough to even stop the good operation of the facility itself, even as the greatest nuclear disaster in world history. And as I've mentioned in one of my answers today, it's a tourist site. Almost every young Ukrainian I've ever talked to about nuclear, all they wanted to do was complain to me about how the costs of visiting are so expensive that they haven't been able to go. So they're like, oh, it's just for foreigners. And that's not what you expect to hear from the nation that's supposed to be traumatized and suffering so greatly from this disaster. And they're the nation that frequently is one of the top 3 or 4 in the world for a percentage of electricity coming from nuclear.
Right, Mark. All right, we are about to end this session, but I would like to give the last question to Dr. Satya. Dr. Satya, if you have a question for Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I enjoy to listen, what Mark explained, how wonderful nuclear is, and on the positive tone because of, we need to hear that, from your perspective. But again, I've looked at what IAEA regulations, because of Indonesia fall under that kind of requirements. And it takes, once that the government has decided to go for nuclear, I've looked at from time frame, it takes for 10 to 15 years. Do you have any way or experience from other part of the world that they can shorten, the process, based on the IAEA supervisions, Probably you have an idea.
So what we saw in the United Arab Emirates was going from nothing, but just a thought to get nuclear, all the way to operating reactors in 15 years. To me, that's what I would call the best case, slowest case, where there's no history of nuclear and you have to go from sand to operating units, right? Indonesia has a much bigger history with nuclear. You're not starting from the beginning, either in technical abilities, facilities. There's already a relationship between IAEA and Indonesia, and not just that. My experience has been that the young people, and even up to perhaps middle management at the nuclear regulation and security bureaucracies, both in national governments in the world, are getting into nuclear curious, interested, and even supportive of nuclear. You'll be shocked at what difference that can make in a bureaucracy when the people who make things happen each day like the thing they're working on. It doesn't guarantee that you'll go rapidly, but at least in the NRC, I've heard many things about it: better attitude and faster paperwork and more flexibility and a concentration on just safety, not slow deliberation. That's helping some new nuclear companies go faster than we would have thought possible. And if that same thing holds true with IAEA, that the young people are going over to Switzerland to work at the IAEA because they love nuclear, not because they hate it or fear it, I think what you'll find is, if there's good concerted effort, a pre-existing relationship, and a clear plan to work with international partners to get your nuclear plants up and running, I suspect that in this climate of international organization concerned about carbon, things will go faster rather than slower.
Right. Pak Satya, I can shed some lights on that. Bapeten, the nuclear regulator, has done some studies, and even they are revising their new regulation on nuclear installation, and they have calculated that it'll take about a minimum of 5 to about 7 years from the start. So, it's true that the 10 to 15 years timeline was also shared by Bapeten long time ago, but now they would say that if it is a private investor, that nobody wants to build nuclear for 15 years, and the case for like Baraka, as Mark said, the construction yet takes about 5 years. So Bapeten has concluded and have a time frame that about 7 years is something that they think is doable.
Okay, this is quite, it's critical too, because of, because we deal with IAEA as an agency, you see. Right. So I'm listening, Mark, it shows that this is a matter of trust.
Yes.
You see, if we are able to convince them, with certain way that we are going to implement the right technology, and then we, secure our, safety and everything. In my opinion, is also a support that they can shorten, than 10 to 15 years. But again, because this is a regulation science, so
right.
And Dr. Satya, in an environment where there's never been so many countries and so many eager partners to help you get there, even countries that are not getting the job done because of political issues within their own borders, they're interested in either building in other countries or urging along other countries and getting to nuclear as sort of examples and object lessons for their own people. So if Indonesia courts international partners, I think you'd find an incredible interest from all sides, from rich nations all around the world, in helping you get there as rapidly as possible. And in past times, even a few years ago, this may very well not have been possible. Major international organizations in the West were absolutely implacably against nuclear, especially in developing nations. There's been a very different change in attitude. I know, for example, in the United States government, there's been a very different change in attitude in very recent years, with the opportunities for a country that's serious and comes and asks the United States, the opportunities are extraordinary. And, they've always been extraordinary for going to ask Russia and probably for China. But the fact that the USA has woken up from its slumber and is looking for ways to help countries around the world get nuclear, that may very well just be a game changer. And we won't know until we ask. And the we in this case is going to be the customer countries. At that point, if you're working with the United States, not that we're incredibly successful in recent decades at landing and then constructing international nuclear projects, but we have ambitions to get better. Many brilliant young people are getting into nuclear in the US, to be sure, and business leaders are turning their attention back to it. But if the US is very, very interested in a country getting nuclear, you would think, you would expect, you would hope that the international bureaucracy itself moves at a faster clip. So I think
one last question. Yes. One last question, with regard to development of nuclear in Vietnam, I remember when John Kerry was State Secretary, he visited there, and afterwards there was an MOU between one of the company from the US with Vietnam. And I don't know what's going on today, because of I haven't heard any development afterward. Do you have any inside information on that?
Sometimes it's good not to be too undiplomatic, especially where I don't have any personal experience in. I was scarcely into nuclear all then. But here's what I can say. It was not even legal for the big financing arms of the US government to finance nuclear in foreign countries in that time. What could he offer, even if he was interested to offer Vietnam from the USA? Right? Now, as to what extent it was an internal decision in Vietnam or outside, there is no comparison to the amount of support or encouragement or help that the United States could possibly have offered in that time compared to what it could offer today to to any country that jumps up and says, hey, we're interested in working with you, America, on this. Now, again, Vietnam not working with America on that. Look, if Vietnam wanted to go work with Russia, they would have found a way. Russia has done an extraordinary job of making sure that the young people come to Russia and are trained up in the language and the engineering technology, that business leaders come over, and that Russia delivers what it says it's going to deliver in nuclear. I'm an American. I would like to see America do well in nuclear. But I'm also not going to I'm not going to close my eyes and not pretend that Russia isn't doing a fantastic job. And as far as we can tell, the customers have been very happy. But to have America in the game is, in my opinion, very important, because it means everybody has got to raise the standard of their presentations, both to customers and to their own industry groups, to get involved and behind the national effort to build abroad. Whether that would have been enough then to change the mind of the leaders of Vietnam, I don't know. But it is not, it's not the 2000s anymore. It's the 2020s. There's a new energy in the air. I do know that very interesting things are happening, at least from America with other countries. And we would hope to see that brings the best out of every exporting nuclear country.
Okay, Mark, this is my...
The customers reflect that with their decisions.
Last question before I end the session is, are you saying that the Biden administration right now is nuclear friendly?
So there are many people in the Biden administration that were in previous administrations that were there when not much nuclear was done. That's a diplomatic way of saying there, in some cases, it would have to be a change of attitude because the people are the same. I would say what appears to be different is this. There are extraordinarily tight and absolutely aligned relationships in the US Congress that are 100% behind an American nuclear revival in the world.
That's very good to know.
For any administration that wants to do something with the US Senate, which holds awesome powers over foreign relations, right, and treaties and engagement, there's an incredible amount of power that the Senate holds. The fact that senators on both sides of the government, both sides of the political spectrum, have an absolute understanding with each other behind the scenes to work every day to getting more nuclear support from America out, that changes everything. What it means is if the Biden administration wants to appoint people who don't really know about nuclear, will they still have to answer to a Congress that wants American nuclear support out in the world?
Very good. So you're saying that this is a bipartisan support for nuclear in the Senate?
Yes, and to the extent that no government can function without a bunch of young people doing all the work underneath, young people in America seem to be moving very much towards, at minimum, not being afraid of nuclear, at maximum, seeing it as the best and easiest way forward to protect the world. So that means that between that top level and the people actually pushing around the paper and writing the speeches and everything, we just hope that connection is in personnel that at minimum are very open to continuing good nuclear work that started the last few years, but we'll know as soon as the appointments come. We're still waiting on some of the key appointments.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay. So I'll close this session and we are going to continue to the next speaker. The next speaker is very interesting. He will not be joining live, but he is sending a video. So I hope you'll stay, Mark, so that you can answer maybe question for Dr. Bjorn Peters. Now, Dr. Bjorn Peters, actually an interesting person. He is the member of the European Union Commission Business Advisory Group for Implementation of Polish Nuclear Program. So this is a guy that basically appointed by the European Commission advisory group to implement the nuclear program in Poland. He is a trained physicist, power station financing expert, and economist, founder of Peter Cole Advising Enterprise on financing matters and policymaker on new energy strategy, published on Economic of Nuclear Power, co-founder of Global Nuclear Power Coalition, and German energy policy blogger. So Dr. Peters is going to share Germany experience on the Energy Wende program, on the energy transition program. Now he's prepared a video on this and we are going to watch the video of his presentation. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me to your conference on nuclear energy in Indonesia. I feel very flattered that I can take part in this. My name is Bjorn Peters. I was asked to present the German situation and what we can learn about it or learn from it. That is quite something. As the conference by time zone is really in the middle of the night here in Germany, I was allowed to record it. And I'm doing this on the day before the conference. And I hope you have had already very good speeches, and I will try to continue on that very good level. I've prepared a short presentation, so I will switch on to PowerPoint now. No, this is the wrong one. Here it is. So learnings from the German energy transition. Maybe a short word on myself. I'm a trained physicist. I've spent my professional life in strategy consulting and financing. I have become sort of an economist, but for many years I have financed power station commodity businesses all over the world, and maybe with 100 projects or so. I've founded 5 years ago a research institute, and I'm advising companies and politicians on the strategy formulation for energy and commodity markets. I've published a little bit on mostly on the economic side of power markets, and I'm running, for example, an own blog, unfortunately all in German, so you won't be able to see exactly what it is about. And I'm a proud member, a founding member of the Nuclear Pride Coalition that has brought us all together. I would like to start with a historical review starting in Paleolithic times. So it is an observation that all innovations, all leaps in human civilization were the result of generating and accessing new energy technologies. It starts with the taming of fire. It is 10,000 years ago that we learned how to tame animals, to tap into the flows of natural and environmental energies, such as wind and hydro energies, were used very early. So setting sail is a thing that we do since 5,000 years at least. And yes, we have invented slavery so as to exploit other people, which we, of course, have overcome, fortunately. Which is actually a topic that we will see later on. To overcome sources of energies is, if they don't turn to be viable any longer, is a very typical pattern in human development. In the medieval times, we discovered charcoal, peat, real coal, and even whale oil as energy sources. And we were certainly optimizing other environmental energies, mostly wind and hydro still. And in the industrialization phase, that was when we learned to use huge amounts of energy to such an extent that an average middle-class person consumes now as much energy as 800 years ago, maybe a duke with so a very, very high-ranking person in the medieval society. And that is what industrialization has brought to us. And all the other human developments that we've taken on so far, we owe to mostly the fossil fuels, so we should be grateful for them. But of course, their end is coming near. So we need to find cleaner sources of energy. And that is where I believe that the future will bring mostly a nuclear age. But of course, some of the environmental energies are still here to stay. And this is the context that I would like to use to present now the German situation. So what is the, oh yes, sorry, one word. The point in the civilization has always been to get higher concentration in terms of land usage. We were 5 million people at the beginning of the Neolithic age. We are now more than 5 billion, so more than 1,000 times more people. This is only possible by concentrating in the use of surface. It is a constant in the human development that we make ourselves less dependent on the weather. The availability has become better, but we have lowered costs and the environmental impact of our energy usage. So when in the medieval times, we cut, even at the beginning of the industrialization, Britain, for example, has lost most of its forests because we didn't care about where we get the energy from. We took what was near, what was around us. And that is something that so Germany has saved their forests because we discovered coal before the industrial age. Now, what about the German Energiewende, so the energy transition? We had a lot of ecological, economical, social, technological, and other targets. So we wanted to have a cleaner energy, less emissions of all types. We wanted to have lower prices, less dependence. It's the thought of autarky, essentially a socialist or target, so that people promote that don't like trading. It was even so the expectation that the energy transition would democratize the energy sector, and that this would be all so cheap that everybody would love it. On the technological side, that's actually the only target we have actually achieved is that we managed to reduce the cost of solar PV and wind dramatically in the case of solar. So it's about a factor of 10 or so in the last 15 years only. And we said we bring them into mass production in order to make them freely available to everybody. And we wanted to phase out nuclear energy, and we're going to in only 2 years' time. So they will all be gone. Certainly the other sectors, so this was all about power generation. Issues in the heating sector and the mobility sectors were not really addressed. That is something we only start now since a couple of years. But what is the reality? That here you see a typical situation within the German market. The brown curve, or the top of the brown curve, is the load. So this varies. We have picked here in August last year, sorry, with lots of solar production and sometimes wind, as you see in the second half of the month. And sometimes it was rather wind still in the first half of the month, or even first 2/3 of the month. That leads to some days, like here at the very end, August 27, that nearly all energy came from environmental energies. So mostly solar and wind, of course. And on other days, we had lots of other sources that we needed in order to fuel our economy. And the thing is that in average, we have a dirty secret. The carbon intensity is still dramatic. This is, you might be familiar with the electricitymap.org that maps many countries for their carbon intensity, and Germany in the middle is still rather brown. That was taken an hour ago. It's a winter day. It is relatively warm. There is wind, but on other days, yesterday, for example, it was a little bit sunnier, but after sunset, we had in Germany a color like Poland with more than double the specific carbon emissions. In other countries, look at France to the southwest of Germany, which is in the middle here. So this is France, this is Germany. This is relatively green, and why so? They did their energy transition already 30 years ago. They built lots of nuclear power plants. So this is certainly a strategy that seems quite promising to overcome the use of carbon-intense fuels. Leading to, let's say, essentially the same slide as before. So what has happened to all those targets? We have a relatively stable carbon footprint because we have replaced nuclear with coal and not with really environmental energies. We have the highest power prices of all OECD countries. It's more than 33 euro cents, about 40 US cents per kilowatt hour. We still import massive amounts of energy. Our power industry is in the decline. We have social unrest, and we have lost our leading position in power generation. So Siemens was a very big player only 10 years ago, but they have essentially given up most of their power station production lines. So what about the remedy strategies? In order to cope with weather-dependent environmental energy such as solar and wind, you might consider storage, but you need such vast amounts that no one will ever build it. The sector coupling is an interesting one because it focuses on what you do with it when you have an overshoot of wind and solar energy, but it doesn't help you in those times when there's not lots of wind and sun, and it's 80% of the time in the year. Grid extension is such a case where you theoretically could power an entire continent because somewhere you always have wind and solar energy, but you need humongous amounts of transmission lines, and they will be very, very big, so 100 gigawatt lines in order to do so. Of course, we have international cooperation, meaning we import power and maybe hydrogen or whatever, but that one of the targets of the energy transition has been the independence on imports. So this doesn't really change the picture. And last, the capacity markets could be an interesting thing. That means we finance a complete thermal backup power system by fixed payments. And both systems then coexist. So the renewable energy part, the solar and wind energy part, and the backup power system, which used to be the full power system previously. Unfortunately, for reasons that I can't delve into much more here, this is not compatible with the market economy. It is only compatible with a planning economy. And the price signal on exchanges is destroyed because in such a case you have either power prices of essentially nil if there is an excess of solar and wind energy in the system, or you have infinite power prices, as you have seen, for example, in Japan or in Texas now, a couple of days ago, when power stations don't deliver, the power prices at the exchange can go up by a factor of 10 and 100 easily. So you have the situation where we probably got something wrong. And if you compare, so you always are probably familiar with the categorical imperative by Immanuel Kant, one of my compatriots who lived in the 18th century. He said, act only according to that maxim whereby you can will that it should become a universal law. And translated to the energy market, you could formulate, choose energy technologies that ensure cost-effective, stable, and ecological energy provision, even when they are scaled up to a maximum. What does that mean? This is my recommendations for you today. If you allow me, I believe that when you pick your energy strategy for the future, you should very carefully assess the economic and technical viability of all the options. I read that the hydropower potential is still considerable in Indonesia. Of course, you will monitor the environmental impact. I believe that there's lots of opportunities in geothermal energy. Nonetheless, for power production, you need very, very, very good sources. Otherwise, it's prohibitively expensive to build them out. But for the heating and cooling sector, this could be an interesting option. So you might wish to look into it. What about weather dependence in power production? Solar PV certainly is here to stay. It has become very cheap. Many people will simply put a solar panel on their roof and in particular fuel then air conditioning systems with it. And that's essentially a good choice because you get the energy when the sun is hottest and provides you with the most of the cooling demand. With wind power, you might need to be cautious. At least, unfortunately, I've never been to Indonesia, but what I'm reading about the climate situation there is that there is doldrums, so the wind is not blowing constantly. And in Germany, we have the situation that that load and wind power, if you take time series, they are totally uncorrelated. So the wind blows not when we need it to blow, but when it wants it to blow. And that is something that really requires deep analysis into the weather systems and the load patterns in Indonesia. I've done this a couple of times, and this is really a very valuable exercise in many cases. Because if you don't do it, you end up in a situation like in Germany, where essentially wind power is a parasite on the flexibility of the inbuilt flexibility of the thermal power system. So thermal power stations need to be able to reduce and increase their output easily. But with wind power in the system, this flexibility is strained to an extreme. And that is something you probably would like to monitor closely, whether this is really a good idea. So if the environmental energies don't work and we don't want to continue with fossil fuels, the only choice then is nuclear energy. I'm convinced that this has really the highest potential for safe, cheap, reliable, and clean energy, the environmental friendly energy. You will probably look into generation 3 reactors or 3+ reactors from China, Russia, Korea, maybe Europe and the US. And there's lots of interesting SMR developments going on. So small and medium-sized reactors that are produced in the future according to standard procedures and in manufactured at high output. This might be a good option for Indonesia as well. So to conclude, I believe the German energy transition has failed, at least to deliver on its objectives. You hopefully choose a more suitable strategy, energy strategy for Indonesia. But I'm pretty sure that the future of nuclear energy hasn't even really begun. There's lots of innovations coming up, and that is something you might consider in your energy strategy. And so thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, because we don't have Dr. Bjorn Peters to answer the question, I would like to give questions to Mark here. Mark, right, since you know the guy and you know the situation in Germany, there are several key points here that stand out, especially I see in the presentation of Dr. Peters, he said about unrest. You know, people are unrest about wind energy. I mean, we've been hearing that wind is very environmentally friendly and nice. And why would people be unrest, right, about wind energy? Could you shed some lights on that?
Sure. I think when people say environmentally friendly, they mean something extremely specific. What they mean is it does not put out emissions where it produces. No other aspect of wind in terms of environmental performance is of interest to leaders, both in business, finance, politics, and culture who live in capital cities, who live in cities. Now, there are some people who have found a way to live in peace with wind turbines. Traditionally, the way to live in peace in the country with wind turbines is to be paid to do it, and your neighbors move away, for example. But for every other thing that wind turbines do, they are, like many ways of human developments, an intrusion into the natural environment. So, for example, recently, the US technology company, had funded a wind farm in Ireland that was put in an area on a peat bog. And then as a result of the disturbance of construction and the unstable natural environment, the whole section of the peat bog, and I know Indonesia has a great area of peat, slid into a river, started killing the fish, contaminating the river. I would be interested in seeing any calculations on how much methane that will release. But anyway, it's hard to say that that particular development could be environmentally friendly. There's another one. We know that some animals carefully avoid wind turbines. Others fail to avoid wind turbines, and they go like this. But many types of birds do avoid wind turbines. At the point when your wind turbines are 300 meters high, and they go for mile after mile after mile in the windiest corridors, those windy corridors are precisely the corridors that animals have evolved to use for international travel. So at the point that you're putting unprecedented disturbances into immense volumes of the natural environment, and if you're on land, you're cutting roads to go do it, you're doing a great deal of digging and construction to put in the wind turbine, or in the ocean environment, you're undertaking all the activities that lead to the disruption of the noise environment for, say, whales and other advanced sea animals. That's not environmentally friendly. Not at all. And of course, you're scarcely relieving the environmental demand of the backup energy system. You may be reducing some of the flow through of gas that's burned from that, You may be reducing some amount of coal that's burned, but you're not reducing the need for those power plants, as we've seen in Texas over the last few days. So then you're starting to stack environmental impacts. And to the extent it becomes more difficult perhaps to decarbonize your whole country, you have the long run environmental impacts of failing to decarbonize potentially. We've still never seen a country decarbonize with wind. It is theoretically proposed by professors who typically don't like nuclear, but we're yet to observe it in the wild. Certainly we're not observing it in Germany. So all of that is to say the environmental qualities are pretty much limited to a few metrics on emissions. And I think it's more that almost nobody comes to energy or industry from the environmental movement. And many environmentalists are extremely well-to-do and come from very rich places, unless they are indigenous landowners, in which case they are just removed for the amount of energy development, the land development needed for solar and wind. Whether that's right or wrong for an industrial economy, I can't say. All I can say is the area it takes is many hundreds of times that for nuclear, meaning it's very difficult to see how that's good for the environment.
So are you saying that in Europe, there are not in my backyard movement against wind turbine?
They've gone beyond this. They've gone beyond this. For example, Norway, one of the richest countries on earth, about 5 million people in Norway, okay? There is a single Facebook group that has gotten over 100,000 people to join it, only in Norwegian. It doesn't mean everyone's in Norwegian who's joined it, but they're in there to attack all wind turbines in the entire country. Now, only a small percentage of Norwegian power is from wind, something like 5 to 10%, and yet they still organized enough to slow down or stop individual projects and to get a retraction of several types of wind turbine laws that were going to speed up wind turbine development in the country. And even now, when somebody posts an argument or wind or a photo of wind turbines, you can get thousands of likes and angry responses all the way down, people writing impassioned pleas. They're taking our nature. They'll never give it back. People are saying, I'm going to drive my car straight into the crane, stuff like that. That's Norway. That's Norway. And that's not necessarily NIMBY anymore. That's an opposition to an attitude that treats the natural environment as just another thing to exploit, which is what you have to do if you do wind turbines, because you never get enough land. You just have to keep going because it's just not enough. You barely get any energy out of any given plot of land. You have to keep developing.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Satya, do you have any comment from Dr. Peter's presentation? Maybe some comments, remarks? Your voice is still mute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm listening, because I was quite surprised about Germany because of a little bit different with what my slide is.
Okay.
You see, but it is good information, by the way. So I have no further question.
All right. Okay. Very good. But so it is a very good information on what's happening in Germany. So basically what Dr. Peters are saying, if I may conclude, that the Energy Wende program is failing and it is not achieving its target of carbon emission and reduction of energy costs. So with that...
Or Mr. Bob, I would say that it is extremely expensively achieving the first component.
Okay, extremely, yes.
But because that first component was mainly about nuclear being removed, not any kind of carbon thing, that's still the focus.
Right. So basically...
Whether it can make any future progress, we just, again, total emissions are down, but they're about to remove the entire nuclear fleet, which is the bedrock of the country's low carbon energy source. Wind makes more electricity now, but not more reliable, right?
Right.
So it may be that along with the rising rage around the wind turbines, especially cutting into the national forest, Germans are very particular about the forest, that there may not be much extra wind, only much less clean energy from nuclear. In which case, I can come back on and say, here's the update. looks like they haven't made progress. Or if they make surprising progress, we're here to be objective and we can take a look and appreciate that when it comes. But
all right, thank you very much.
Be seen.
So basically, if we want to reduce emission, don't follow what the German do, right? So okay.
and remember, for Indonesia, reducing emission is a relative thing. You've got to get rich, because only then can you truly engage in environmental protection. Look, Germany is one of the few countries that's not in Europe that's not actively regenerating enough of its forest. Why? Partly because it's using so much of its land, instead of regenerating forest, it's using it for biocrops, because it's one way to game the carbon system. You can show that you get credits in any way. And because it's reliable energy and uses good German manufacturing and chemical technologies, it's good for, it's good for Germany. However, sorry, I didn't.
Right.
Europe became rich by deforesting. They became rich by deforesting almost the entirety of the continent. It's only recently, now that they are rich, that they are reforesting. It should not be necessary in a time with industrial technology for all countries to do that, but just keep that in mind when Germany's saying don't cut down the Amazon, don't cut your forest. I think that those forests are important, but unless Germany is offering an alternative and it's regrowing its own forest, you should be very suspicious of its energy and land use programs.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much, Dr. Satya. With that, we close the discussion, and thank you very much for the speakers, Honorable Dr. Satya, Widya, Yudha. I hope that this seminar will shed some light and will open up new dimension, and hopefully that you can share this with the rest of the member of the Energy Council. And for Mark Nelson, thank you very much. We hope that further cooperation on other issue with nuclear, as you can see, that Indonesia is progressing, moving step by step forward into nuclear realizations. And especially, I thank also Pak Dirjen EBTKE over here. He's not here, but we have his director, Pak Chris. Thank you very much, Pak Chris. Say hi to the Director General and thank for his time. And of course, thank you very much for Kommun Yogyakarta for making this seminar happen. With that, I close the seminar. I give back to the MC.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for amazing knowledge from all speakers. And thank you very much also to our moderator. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia is one step away from realizing implementation of nuclear energy. And the Ministry of Energy has built a step-by-step approach by many studies, so that by 2024, hopefully, the government will make a decision. And there is no prohibited regulation in Indonesia to build nuclear power plant. Indonesian government right now is considering nuclear power as a viable option. And nuclear provide huge energy, clean air, and significantly reduce the cost of electricity in the country. And about the waste, fortunately, nuclear waste is very easy to store. It is not correct that it takes millions of years. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we go to the next agenda, there will a little speech from Miss Paris Ortiz from Center for Nuclear, and it is the videos.
Hello everyone, I'm pleased to welcome you all to Indonesia's first Stand Up for Nuclear event, the first Stand Up of 2021. My name is Paris Ortiz-Wines and I'm the Global Director of Stand Up for Nuclear, the world's first pro-nuclear movement, a movement that coordinates action-oriented events across the globe. And it was this past year in 2020, during a global pandemic, that we saw environmentalists, students, nuclear industry workers, and doctors come together to hold 67 events in 28 different countries. And some of you may be asking, what is Stand Up? Why do we need it? What is it? And we must remember and notice that nuclear energy is consistently and deliberately left out of the energy conversation. And we must discover and understand why this is. And that is why you must look at the 1970s, 1980s, where the rise of the anti-nuclear movement took hold. They launched a heavy attack against the global nuclear industry. And it was events like Chernobyl, Fukushima, and the use of nuclear weapons that solidified this fear of nuclear, this narrative that nuclear is not needed, it's too expensive, it's dangerous, that was perpetuated by these activists, has been embedded into our collective consciousness. When you speak of nuclear, many people's responses is Chernobyl and radiation. And for nuclear to survive, to succeed, and to thrive, this needs to change. And that is why we knew that there needed to be a counteracting movement. And that is why in 2018, a group of activists, of allies, of pro-nuclear people came together and decided that enough was enough. Nuclear was the way to go, and nuclear was under attack. We were tired of the misinformation around nuclear energy, and we're very saddened to see that nations like Germany, nations that had helped cultivate and foster this beautiful technology, were turning away from it. That is why we decided to have a public event, a festival, a nuclear pride fest. In 2018, in the month of October, we reconvened. All of our allies from different countries come together, and we threw nuclear party. This festival was filled with face painting, balloons, music, singing. It was a party. And not only were we able to meet other pro-nuclear activists, to engage with those on the streets, but we were able to show the human faces of those who love nuclear. And although this event may seem simple, this is how it starts. This one event has now turned into 67. This one location now has turned into 20 different countries. This event was so successful that we had individuals from around the world calling us saying they wanted to be involved. How could they do their own event in their country? And that is why the Nuclear Pride Fest has evolved into Stand Up for Nuclear. And this is how it starts, by having one event, gathering these people and having this conversation and being proud of nuclear is how it all starts. This past year, we saw the Canadians start their own pro-nuclear organization. Their first event that they held in 2019 was attended by 5 people. They now have a group of 30 to 40 individuals and now have launched their own campaign to refurbish one of their nuclear reactors. And we've seen this happen in Denmark and the Philippines. They too have launched their own pro-nuclear organization. This is how it all starts. And we are providing the images to combat this anti-nuclear story. So what Indonesia is doing right now, this event is monumental. You don't know what's going to come from it. And so I am pleased and honored that you have allowed me to speak to you all. I look forward to seeing what comes out of this event. And good luck, everybody.
Thank you, Paris. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Paris Ortiz. I deliver my apologies because this video must be shown in greetings part. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, finally we arrived in the 4th agenda. Our 4th agenda is launching logo of Kommun Yogyakarta. Well, Kommun Yogyakarta are well known as, Komunitas Muda Nuklir Yogyakarta are well known as Kommun Yogyakarta. It's a youth organization engaged in education, socialization, dissemination of nuclear science and technology in Indonesia, especially in Yogyakarta. Kommun consists of students of various measures of competencies of expertise from various universities in Yogyakarta. In implementing its work, Kommun is active in the study of issues and education of nuclear science and technology, and often collaborates with academics, practitioners, and nuclear professionals in Indonesia. And today, 18th of February 2021, we will rebrand our organization, Kommun Yogyakarta, and we will show our new logo.
That is great. Good logo. Very nice logo.
Yeah, it's very nice, I think. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and finally, we arrived in our last agenda. Our last agenda is a closing ceremony. And it is the end of our webinar. And I am Nanda, and I represent all of the community. I deliver my apologies and say big thanks to all participants who already joined this webinar. And that's all from us. Thank you, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Stay curious.
Oke, thank you Pak Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ya.
Thank you, Pak Bob.